Get comfortable. Let the light go low. Let the pillow take the weight of your head, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been sitting all day. You do not need to follow this closely. You do not need to remember any of it. If you drift off in the middle of a sentence tonight, that is the whole point, and you can pick the thread up again another evening, or never at all. Tonight we are going into a large English country house, on the one day of the year when it is most fully itself. A house party is arriving. 14 guests are coming down by train and carriage, with their own maids and their own valets and their own trunks, and they will be fed and warmed and washed and entertained for the better part of a week. But we are not going in through the front door. We are going in through the door the guests never use, the one at the side of the house where the gravel gives way to flagstones, past the scullery window and the coal store, and the passage that smells of stone and soap. That is where the house actually works. Let me tell you the version of this evening that everybody already knows, because it is a lovely version, and it is worth setting down carefully before we take it apart. It is 6:30 on an evening in March. The drawing room is warm. The fire has been drawing beautifully for hours, which is not a small thing in a room that size, in a stone house in March. There are candles lit along the mantelpiece and lamps on the small tables, and the light has that particular soft orange quality that we now spend a great deal of money trying to imitate with light bulbs. There are flowers on a side table, and they are fresh, which in March in Wiltshire is not something the garden does on its own. There is a bowl of strawberries waiting to go through to the dining room, and it is the middle of March, and they are perfect. Upstairs in every bedroom, a fire has been lit. A can of hot water stands on each washstand under a flannel cover to keep it hot, with a fresh towel folded over the rail beside it. The beds have been made up with linen so thoroughly aired that it is warm to the touch. There is writing paper on the desk, ink in the well, a candlestick with matches, a carafe of drinking water, and a clean glass, and a box of coals by the grate, in case the fire wants feeding at midnight. Down in the dining room, the table has been laid with a damask cloth, pressed so flat it looks like a sheet of paper, and set with more glasses per person than most of us own in total, and the wine has been brought up and chilled, and there is ice waiting for the puddings, in a country with no refrigeration. And the story we tell ourselves about all of this is very simple. The family is rich. Rich people live like that. The comfort is a feature of the house. The way the height of the ceilings is a feature of the house. It came with the address. That is not what you are going to see tonight. Here is the thing about that drawing room, and the warm sheets, and the strawberries, and the ice. None of it was bought. Almost none of it arrived from anywhere. It was made in that building, that week, by hand, by people, most of it within the last 24 hours, and all of it in rooms built specifically so that no guest would ever see or smell or hear the making of it. The strawberries were forced under glass in a heated pit in the walled garden, weeks ahead of their season, by a man who got up in the night to check a flue. The flowers came from a glass house, kept at a temperature that had to be maintained through a cold snap by burning coal all night. The ice was cut off the lake in January in flat slabs, carried up on a cart, and packed into a brick pit sunk into the ground under the shrubbery, where it will keep until August if the drainage is right and the door is kept shut. The hot water in those cans was boiled in a copper in the back kitchen and carried up 2 flights of service stairs, 10 or 12 pounds of water in a brass can in each hand, and it will be carried up again after dinner, and again at bedtime, and again in the morning. The warmth of those sheets is an entire small building's worth of technology. a heated cupboard, a laundry the size of a workshop, a wash that takes 3 days and involves boiling, pounding, wringing, bluing, starching and pressing, and a woman who can tell by touch whether linen is properly dry or merely nearly dry. That soft orange lamplight took someone 2 hours this morning. Every lamp in that room had its glass washed, its reservoir filled, and its wick trimmed straight with scissors, because a wick trimmed crooked smokes, and smoke on a ceiling is a scandal. Every one of those candles was counted out of a locked cupboard by a woman with a key at her waist, and the stubs will be counted back in. So the luxury of a Victorian country house was not a possession. It was a performance, staged fresh every single day by around 30 people in a building deliberately designed to hide them. And that is the hidden luxury I want to show you tonight. Not the drawing room, the machinery behind it. Because when you look at one of these houses properly, you notice something strange about the plan. Roughly half of it is not for the family at all. There is a whole second house wired into the first one, and it has its own staircases, its own corridors, its own bells, its own hierarchy, its own dining room, its own timetable, and its own doors. And the point of all of it is concealment. The kitchen is built absurdly far from the dining room, on purpose, so that the smell of cooking cannot reach anybody who is eating. There are separate stairs, so that a housemaid carrying a slop pail and a guest coming down to breakfast can never, under any circumstances, meet on a landing. There is a door covered in green baize on a spring hinge, and it closes itself behind you with a soft thump. And it is not just a door, it is the line between the two houses, and crossing it changes how you walk, how you speak, and what your face is allowed to do. Tonight we are going to walk all of it. The still room, where the preserves and the coffee and the fine cakes are made, and where the good china is washed by hand, because nobody else is trusted with it. The linen room, with the sheets stacked by the dozen, and every corner marked with a number in stitched thread, because linen was treated as capital, like silver. The storeroom, which is kept locked, and the account book that lives in it. The lamp room, the plate closet, the laundry out beyond the yard, with its coppers and its mangle, and its rack of irons heating on the stove, the ice house under the shrubbery, the pinery and the vinery, where pineapples were grown in England in heated beds of tanner's bark, at a cost that would make your eyes water, mostly so they could sit on a table and be admired. The bellboard in the back passage, which by 9 o'clock this evening will be a wall of small brass tongues, quivering. And we are going to walk it as the one person who holds keys to nearly all of it. Not the mistress of the house, who will appear for about 20 minutes in the morning room, and whose role in this evening is real but narrower than you might think. Not the butler, who has his own kingdom and his own quarrels. You are the housekeeper. You are the person who knows how many sheets are in the cupboard without looking, how much tea went out this week, which housemaid is quick and which one is careful, and why those are different things, and exactly how long it takes a dish of hot soup to travel from the kitchen to the dining table by way of 200 yards of corridor. You are the reason the house can pretend that comfort simply happens. We will start before daylight, in a cold room with a small fire, 20 minutes before 6 in the morning. We will finish somewhere past midnight, with a candle, walking the house door by door to lock it. Between those 2 points there is a whole day of engineering that no guest in that building will ever think about for a single second, and that is precisely how everybody involved wants it. If you enjoy falling asleep to this sort of thing, Subscribing helps more than you would think, and it costs you nothing but a tap. And I always like knowing who is out there in the dark. So if you are awake enough, leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. I read them, usually at an hour when I ought to be asleep myself. Now, let the room go quiet around you. Let the last of the day go. We are going back to the spring of 1883, into a great cold house in Wiltshire that is not yet awake, where in a few minutes a bell will ring in an attic passage, and a woman who has not been called by her own first name in 12 years will sit up in the dark and reach for a ring of keys. The clock on the mantel says 20 minutes before 6, but you were awake before it, the way you have been awake before it for 12 years. There is a particular quality to a March morning in a house like this. The cold has had all night to settle, and it has settled everywhere, in the water, in the jug, in the linoleum, in the iron of the bedstead. Your breath is visible in the dark. Somewhere above your head, a bell rings twice in the attic passage, which is not for you. That is the maids being called, and it means the day has officially begun, though you have already been lying in the dark for several minutes, running through a list that has 14 names on it. You get up. You do not linger, because lingering is a habit you cannot afford and have not had for a long time. Your room is on the ground floor of the service wing, at the point where two passages meet, which is not an accident. It was built there so that nothing can move through this end of the house without passing your door. You have a bedroom, narrow, with a press for your clothes and a single window that looks onto the kitchen court. Through the doorway beside it is your sitting room, and the sitting room is the thing that marks you out from almost everyone else under this roof. It has an armchair covered in horsehair. It has a hearthrug. It has a small square table where you take your meals, a bookcase with perhaps 20 volumes in it, and a mantelpiece with a china dog on either end, both of which were given to you, and neither of which you would have chosen. It has a fireplace of its own, and coal allowed for it, and a maid whose duties include laying that fire, which means that you are one of 4 people in a household of 30-odd who is warm in the mornings without doing anything about it herself. It also has a desk. That is the real center of the room. The desk has a sloping lid and a lock, and inside it are the account books and the inventories and the letters from tradesmen in the market town and the little printed cards of the grocer in London who supplies the tea. The books are the reason the armchair exists. You are not given a fire and a hearthrug because anyone in this house is fond of you. You are given them because the work you do requires a private room to do it in, and because a woman who keeps the accounts must be seen to be a woman of some standing, or the accounts mean nothing. You wash in cold water, and you dress quickly, a dress of black stuff, plain, high at the neck, made by a dressmaker in the town 2 years ago and let out at the seams since. A white cap, small, more a signal than a garment, a collar, a brooch with a lock of your mother's hair in it, which is the only object on your person that has nothing to do with your employment. Later in the day, when the guests are in the house, and there is any chance of your being seen at the front of it, you will change into black silk, and the silk is not vanity. It is uniform. It tells anyone who glances at you in a corridor that you are not a housemaid, that you are not to be given an order by a visiting valet, and that if you are addressed at all, it will be as Mrs., which brings us to your name, because it is worth pausing on before we go any further. You are 42 years old. You have never married. Everyone in this house, from the family in their beds upstairs to the scullery maid who is 13 and started at Michaelmas, calls you Mrs., because the title belongs to the office rather than to the woman holding it. A housekeeper is Mrs. as a matter of course. Married or not, your first name still exists. It appears in a letter from your sister in Somerset, perhaps 4 times a year, and you read it there and feel something faintly like recognition, the way you might catch sight of a dress you used to wear. Nobody in Wiltshire has said it aloud since 1871. You are paid £60 a year, quarterly, along with board and lodging, an allowance of tea and sugar, and beer money. Set against the country at large, that is a good income for a woman. A housemaid in this house receives about £16 a year. The scullery maid 10, and both of them also receive their food and a bed, which is the point of the arrangement. Set against the family upstairs, whose income runs into many thousands, and who will spend more on this 1 week of entertaining than you will earn between now and Christmas, it is nothing at all. Both of those facts are true at once, and you have long since stopped finding the second one interesting. What you find interesting is the store cupboard. Now, the keys. They are on a steel ring, and the ring goes on a chain at your waist, and there are 11 of them. You know each one by the feel of it in the dark, which is a skill nobody taught you and nobody has ever remarked on. The heaviest opens the dry store, where the tea and coffee and loaf sugar are, and the spices in their tin canisters, and the candles by the dozen box, and the soap. 2 open the linen presses in the linen room upstairs. 1 opens the china closet, where the dinner service lives, that is used only when there are people in the house, and which is counted after every use. 1 opens the still room cupboard, with the preserves and the cordials and the orange flower water. 1 opens the medicine chest. 1 opens the housemaid's cupboard, where the beeswax and turpentine and the good brushes are kept, because good brushes go missing in every house on earth. And 1, small, brass, opens the desk in the room you are standing in. The butler has his own ring and his own kingdom, which is the cellar and the plate. That division is fixed, and neither of you crosses it. Here is what the keys actually mean, beyond the obvious. In a house of this size, nothing valuable is left where a person can simply reach for it. Not because everyone is thought to be a thief, but because the system does not rely on anybody's character. Sugar is locked up. Tea is locked up. Candles are locked up. Every ounce of them that leaves the cupboard leaves through your hands and is written in your handwriting in a book that the mistress of the house will look over at the end of the month. 30 people work in this building. 1 of them is trusted with the store cupboard, and that trust has been converted into 11 pieces of shaped metal that make a particular sound when you walk. The maids can hear you coming from 2 corridors away. They stop talking. That is also part of the job, and you did not design it, and you use it every day. So, 14 guests. The list is on your desk, in the mistress's hand, and you have had it since Tuesday. 14 arriving today, most by the afternoon train, and then by carriage from the station, all of them expected to be dressed and in the drawing room before dinner at 8. 11 bedrooms to be opened, aired, made up with the good linen, and given fires. Some of those bedrooms have not been slept in since the shooting in November. Every one of them needs a full water arrangement, a full lamp arrangement, coal in the box, writing paper on the desk, flowers if the gardener can be persuaded, and a housemaid within reach of the bell all evening. Then there is the shadow household, which the family does not think about, and you think about constantly. Guests of this class do not travel alone. Several of the ladies will arrive with their own maids, and 1 or 2 of the gentlemen with their own men, so that some 10 or 11 additional servants will appear at the back of the house today, and must be fed 3 times a day for a week, seated in the servants' hall in the correct order of precedence, and given somewhere to sleep. You have been working out for 2 days where to put them. It involves moving 2 of your own housemaids in together and borrowing a bed, and every meal for the whole of it, upstairs and downstairs, and the ice, and the fruit, and the linen, and the washing that follows. Here is the thing to hold on to, because everything else tonight will hang off it. The story a house like this tells about itself is that comfort is a property of the building, that the rooms are simply warm, that the water in the brass can is simply hot, that the strawberries in March are simply there, and the lamps are simply bright, and dinner simply arrives in 8 courses, at the correct temperature, at the correct hour, on plates that have been warmed. Guests walk through the front door and into an atmosphere of effortlessness so complete that it does not even register as a quality of the place. It registers as nothing, as air. That effortlessness is a manufactured product. It is made every single day by about 30 people working from before dawn until after midnight, using coal, water, ice, linen, paraffin, copper, and their own arms and backs, and it has to be made freshly every day because it does not keep. Warmth goes out, water cools, lamps burn down, and the whole architecture of the building, which we are going to walk through in detail before the sun comes up, exists to make sure that none of that production is ever seen, heard, or smelled from the other side of the green baize door. That is the hidden luxury, not the strawberries, the concealment. You take the candle from the mantelpiece and light it, and the room goes yellow and small. Above you, faintly, there is the sound of feet on bare boards in the attic passage, and then on the back stairs, quick, several pairs, going down. The housemaids are up. In 11 minutes, the first grate in this house will be swept. You settle the keys at your waist, and you open your door onto the cold passage. The passage is colder than your room by several degrees, and it smells of stone and cold ash, which is the smell of this house at this hour and no other. You carry the candle low, because you know the flags well enough to walk them blind, and the flame behaves better held down out of the draught. Somewhere ahead of you, a door opens, and a girl says something short to another girl, and both of them go quiet when they hear your step. That, too, is part of the morning. In the morning room, the third housemaid is already on her knees on a folded dust sheet with her box beside her, and she has done the worst of it. The fender is out on the hearth. The ashes are in the cinder pail. Her hands are black to the wrist, and there is a smear of black lead along her jaw where she has pushed her hair back without thinking, and she is working the grate bars with a brush in short, hard strokes, because black lead does not shine when it is put on, it shines when it is worked, and the working is the whole labor of it. She is 17. She has been in the house 6 months. She wears a coarse apron of dark Hessian over her print dress for this hour of the day, and at 8:30 she will change it for a white one and become a different creature entirely, and nobody upstairs will ever see the first version of her. There is an order to the rooms, and the order is not a matter of preference. The rooms the family will enter first must be swept, black-leaded, laid, lit, and aired first, which means the breakfast room and the morning room and the library in that sequence, and then the hall stove, which is a slow brute of a thing and wants attention early, or it sulks all day. The dining room comes later, because the dining room will not be wanted until dinner, and the guest bedrooms come later still, mid-morning, because a bedroom fire lit at 6 o'clock for a guest who will not see the room until 4 in the afternoon is 9 hours of coal burned into an empty room. This sounds obvious. It is in fact the sort of judgment that separates a house that runs from a house that merely spends money, and it lives in your head, and in the head of the head housemaid, and nowhere on paper at all. Consider what one fire actually costs, not in coal, but in a person's hands and time, because the coal is the cheap part. A dust sheet is spread over the hearthrug, so no ash reaches the wool. The fender and the fire irons are lifted away. The dead fire is raked out, and the ash goes into the pail, and the cinders are sifted from the ash and kept, because cinders burn again, and are used in the servants' passages and the back rooms, and under the copper, and no country house in England throws away a cinder. The grate bars and the front are black-laded, which is paste, brush, and elbow, twice a week at least, in a room in daily use. Any steel is rubbed with emery paper and rag, because steel spots overnight in a damp English March, and a spotted fender in a morning room is a visible failure of housekeeping. The hearthstone is washed and whitened, and only then does the girl lay the new fire, which is its own small piece of craft, paper twisted, not crumpled, then dry wood laid crosswise with air between the pieces, then the small coal, then 2 or 3 larger lumps at the back, where they will burn slowly and hold the heat. Then she sweeps the hearth, folds the sheet inward to trap the dust, carries the pail down, washes her hands, and goes to the next room. 10 minutes if all is well, 20 if the grate wants black-leading, and half an hour if some careless soul has let a fire go out entirely and the flue has cooled. Multiply it. In this house, with the family at home and a party expected, there are 26 grates that will be alight at some point today, and 11 that must be alight before the family come downstairs. Before breakfast, 3 housemaids will between them lay and light those 11 fires, sweep and dust 3 reception rooms, carry down 11 pails of ash, and carry up the coal to fill 11 coal boxes. The coal is the part people never picture. It does not come up through a pipe. It comes up on a stair, in a scuttle, in somebody's hand. A filled scuttle holds something near 28 pounds of coal, which is to say, 1/4 of a hundredweight, and a bedroom in use will take 2 of them in a day, and 3 in hard weather. The scuttle comes from the coal store in the basement court, up the back stairs, which are stone and steep and unlit except by the window on the half landing, and they were built steep deliberately, because stairs the servants use may be steep, and stairs the family use may not. 80-odd steps from the coal store to the second-floor passage. A housemaid on a March day in a full house will climb those stairs, loaded, something between 20 and 30 times, and come down them loaded too, with ash, because the ash goes out the same way the coal comes in. Nobody in the drawing room will ever say the word coal. They will say the room is warm. You go on through the morning room and stand where the light will fall when the shutters are opened, and you look at the girl's fire without appearing to look at it, and it is wrong. The wood is laid flat and tight, packed down like a floor, with no air under it, and there is too much small coal on top. It will smoke, and it will take, and then it will slump and die about the time the family sit down to breakfast, and a fire that dies at 9 o'clock in a room that has to be presentable at 11 is an hour of somebody's day gone to nothing. Here is where the office actually lives, not in the keys, in this. You do not tell her in front of the second housemaid, who has just come in with the coal. You do not sigh, either, because a sigh is worse than a word, and every girl in this house can read your face at 15 paces. You wait until the other one has gone out, and then you kneel down on the boards beside her in your good black skirt, which she notices, and you take out the top layer of coal with your fingers and set it aside, and you lift the wood, and you lay it again with the pieces crossed and standing a little, and you say that it was near enough, but that this room draws badly on a north wind and wants more air under it than the library does. Then you get up and go, and you say nothing else about it, and she will lay that grate correctly for the rest of her life. She will not thank you, and should not. In 4 years, she may be a head housemaid somewhere, and the knowledge that the morning room draws badly on a north wind will be hers, and she will not remember where she got it. By 5:45, the back kitchen is the loudest place in the building, and the reason is water. There is no hot tap on any bedroom floor in this house. There is no hot tap in any bedroom in nearly every great house in England in this year, including houses far grander than this one, with bathrooms newly put in and boasted of. Hot water is made in one place, at the bottom, and it goes up in cans, carried by hand. The copper in the back kitchen is a set brick tub with a firebox under it, filled by hand or by a lift pump, and it is lit before 5, and it is the first fire in the house every day of the year, because everything else waits on it. Beside it stand the cans, brass ones for the family and the better guest rooms, japanned tin for the rest, each holding about 2 gallons, each with a flannel cover, quilted and tied, so that the water is still hot when it reaches the 3rd floor, and so that the housemaid's arm is not burned on the way. 2 gallons of water weighs a little over 20 pounds. The can adds 3 or 4 more. That is what a housemaid carries up 80 steps, one in each hand if she is strong and hurried, and sets down outside a bedroom door on the strip of drugget laid there for the purpose, and taps once, and does not enter. Now do a bath, a hip bath, which is the usual thing, a high-backed tin shape like a shoe, set on a mat before the bedroom fire, with a sheet over the mat, and a can of cold standing beside it. 4 cans of hot to make it worth getting into, sometimes 5. That is 80 to 100 pounds of hot water, carried up in 4 or 5 journeys, and then the same water carried down again afterwards in the slop pails, because a full hip bath cannot be tipped anywhere but into a pail, and the pails go down the back stairs to the housemaid's closet on each floor, or all the way to the bottom in the older wings. 1 bath, up and down, is something over 100 weight of water, moved twice, by 1 woman, on stairs, in silence, without being seen by anybody in the corridor. 14 guests are coming. Not all of them will bathe. All of them will have hot water in the morning and hot water again before dinner, and several will want it a 3rd time, and the ladies' maids arriving with them will want water for washing hair and pressing and sponging travelling dresses, and every drop of it comes out of that 1 copper in the back kitchen and up those stairs in somebody's hands. And under all of it, the coal. This house burns something over 200 tons of it in a year, which at the price coal fetches here, delivered from the station by cart, comes to a little short of 200 pounds a year for warmth and hot water and cooking alone. 200 pounds, which is to say more than 3 times your wage, and roughly the whole annual wage bill of the 6 housemaids and the scullery maid together. The house spends more on burning coal than on the women who carry it. You stand a moment in the service passage, where the copper's warmth reaches, and you look up at the bellboard. It fills the wall above the doorway, a long mahogany panel with rows of bells on coiled steel springs, each with a small painted label beneath it in faded copper plate. Library, morning room, dining room, blue room, chintz room, best bachelor, second bachelor, nursery passage. 29 of them, and every girl in this house learns to read them by ear before she learns to read them by eye, because a bell goes on swinging after it has stopped ringing, and the last one to move is the one that was pulled. At this hour, the board is dead still. All 29 hang plumb and silent in the candlelight, and the only sound in the passage is the copper ticking as it heats. By 9 tonight, that board will not be quiet for 4 minutes together. 6:30, and the still room is the warmest room in the house that is not a kitchen. It sits at the end of the service passage, with its own small range, its own dresser, its own sink, and its own door that shuts on the rest of the world, and it belongs to you, not to the cook. That distinction matters more than an outsider would ever guess, and you will come back to it. For now, what matters is that the still room maid has been up since 5:15, that the fire in the little range is drawing properly, and that the room smells of coffee being ground. She grinds it fresh, every morning, in a wooden mill braced against her knee. The beans were roasted here the day before yesterday in a hand-turned drum over that same fire, because coffee, bought ready roasted, goes flat inside a week, and coffee, bought ready ground, is not coffee at all, it is chicory and dust and whatever else the grocer felt like adding. So the beans come into this house green, in a sealed canister, and they are roasted in small quantities and ground in smaller ones, and the family upstairs drinks the result at 9 o'clock and thinks it is simply what coffee tastes like. On the dresser behind her stand the things this room produces. Bread already in the oven for the breakfast rolls, a dish of butter turned into shells with a scalded wooden roller, toast under a napkin, 2 loaf sugars broken down into lumps with the sugar nippers, which is a job that takes the skin off a thumb if you hurry it. 3 kinds of preserve in white jars with paper covers, all of them made in this room last summer and autumn. A jug of barley water for anybody who asks for it. A tin of thin, sweet biscuits for the drawing room in the afternoon. She does not cook a single hot dish in here, and she is not permitted to. Everything savory comes from the kitchen. Everything sweet, light, preserved, brewed, or distilled comes from here, and so does every cup of tea and coffee served anywhere in the building, and so does the washing up of the best breakfast china, which the scullery is not allowed to touch on the grounds that the scullery breaks things. Your own breakfast is laid in your sitting room next door, and it is laid with a formality that would look absurd to anybody who did not live here. There is a cloth. There is a tray with the good white china, not the kitchenware. There is toast and butter and a boiled egg, and the same coffee the dining room will get, and a small pot of the same preserve. And there are 4 places, because the upper servants do not eat in the servants' hall. The butler comes in at 20 to 7, having already been in the plate room. The cook comes in when she can, which today is not at all, because there are 14 guests to feed by 8:30 tonight. The lady's maid will come in when the mistress releases her, which may be an hour from now. So this morning it is the butler and yourself, sitting at your own table in your own room, eating a proper breakfast off proper plates, while 30 other people in this house eat bread and dripping and cold bacon, standing up or sitting on benches. Nobody upstairs decided this. It is not written in any instruction the family ever gave. It grew here. in the space below the baize door, and it is enforced by the servants themselves with more rigor than the family could ever manage. The hall has its own hierarchy, its own order of precedence at table, its own etiquette of who may speak first, and who carves, and who is served, and the upper servants withdrawing to eat apart is the top of it. In a good many houses, the housekeeper's sitting room is called the pug's parlour, half in affection and half not, and the joke is understood on both sides of the door. You drink your coffee. The butler reads the times of the trains aloud from a folded paper and says that the 4:15 will be the one that matters. Then he goes, and you take your keys off the table, and you go and open the storeroom. Here is where the shape of a country house shows itself most plainly, because a stranger walking into this room would not understand why it needs a lock at all. There is nothing in it that looks like treasure. Shelves of canisters and jars, sacks, a set of scales with brass weights, from 1/4 of an ounce up to 14 pounds, drawers, a row of stone jars along the floor. It looks like a village shop with no counter. What is actually in it is money in its most portable form. Consider the tea. Good black tea costs something like 2 shillings and 4pence the pound at present, and the house holds 30 or 40 pounds of it at a time in a lined chest, which is to say 4 pounds sterling, sitting on a shelf, in a substance that weighs almost nothing, leaves no mark when a handful goes missing, and can be sold in any town in England by anybody at all, with no questions asked. Coffee, 1 shilling and 6pence the pound, and rising when the crop is poor. Loaf sugar, 5pence, and there are 200 weight of it. Candles, and the candles are worth a paragraph of their own, because the wax candles for the dining room and the drawing room cost near 2 shillings a pound, where the composite candles for the back passages cost 6pence, and a girl who quietly swaps one for the other in the guest bedrooms is stealing 18pence a pound and improving nobody's evening. Then the small expensive things, which live in a drawer inside the room, nutmegs, cinnamon in quills, mace, cloves, whole peppercorns at 1 shilling the pound, bitter almonds, isinglass for the jellies, which costs more by weight than most people in the village earn in a day, vanilla, and in the corner, under a separate key, the brandy and the sherry that this room uses for preserving fruit and making cordials and dosing anyone in the hall who is genuinely ill, and which is under a separate key for reasons that require no explanation. Soap next, 3pence halfpenny the pound, in bars as long as your forearm, and the house gets through an amount of soap that would astonish anybody who has only ever washed for 2. Starch, powder blue, candle ends, kept and weighed, because candle ends are a perquisite, and a perquisite has to be counted before it can be given away. None of it is guarded because the household is thought to be dishonest. It is guarded because there is no other way to tell honest waste from anything else. A pound of sugar may be dropped, spoiled, spilled in the scullery, taken by mice, or taken by a person, and once it is gone, there is no possible method of establishing which, unless somebody wrote down that it left this room and who carried it out. So somebody writes it down. That somebody is you. You take the day's issue now, before the house is properly awake, because once the bells start, you will not have a clean 1/4 of an hour again until 11 at night. Tea for the dining room and tea for the hall, weighed separately, because they are not the same tea. Coffee for the still room, sugar, both loaf and moist, 2 pounds of currants and 1 of raisins for the kitchen, because the cook has a boiled pudding in mind. Rice, isinglass, weighed out on the small brass pan to the 1/4 ounce. 6 pounds of soap for the laundry, which is a great deal of soap and will still not be enough, because the wash after a house party is a war. Candles counted out by the dozen into the lamproom basket. Each thing goes on the scale. Each thing goes in the book. The book is ruled in columns in your own hand, date and article and quantity and the room it went to, and when the kitchen maid comes to the door with her basin for the currants, she waits while you write, because the writing is the point of the transaction and the currants are only the occasion for it. Everything consumed in this house passes through this room, across those scales, and into that handwriting. Every ounce. The family eats and drinks and washes and reads by lamplight for a whole year inside a set of columns kept by one woman in a storeroom off a back passage. And the book cuts both ways. Once a month you carry it, with the tradesman's bills and the day book and the wage sheet, into the morning room, and the mistress goes through it with a pencil. She is not unkind about it. She is not looking for wickedness. She is doing what every mistress in every house of this size is instructed to do by every book of household management ever printed, which is to check her housekeeper, because the whole system rests on the housekeeper being checkable. So the book is two things at the same time, and this is the thing about service that people outside it never quite hold in their heads. It is proof of your trust. You keep it because nobody else in the house is permitted to. 12 years of it, in your hand, unquestioned. And it is also the instrument by which that trust is examined every 4 weeks by a woman 15 years younger than you, and if the columns did not add, no amount of the 12 years would help. You know what a discrepancy costs, because you have seen it. Not in this house. In your second place, a still room maid who could not account for 11 shillings worth of sugar and tea, who very possibly had not taken it, and who left in a cart 3 days later without a character. That last word is the whole thing. Without a written character from her last employer, a woman of that age has no way of getting another place, none, because no house will take her, and there is no register, no appeal, no board she can put her case to. Her working life ends at a kitchen door on a Tuesday afternoon, which is why the columns in your book add, not out of virtue, out of a very clear understanding of what the alternative looks like from the inside of a cart. You close the ledger and set it back on its shelf. The last thing you do in here is fetch what the still room needs for the day, and the smell as you lift the covers is the pleasantest thing this house will offer you before nightfall. Damson cheese, dark as a bruise and stiff enough to slice. Quince, gone the color of amber. A stone jar of orange flower water distilled in this room in June, which is where the room's name came from, long before anybody living here was born. Then the door, the key, the bolt going over with that particular deep note that a good lock makes in a stone passage, and the ring back at your waist, where it belongs. 7 o'clock. The light in the passage windows has gone from black to the color of weak tea, and somewhere above you a door closes and a pair of feet go along a boarded floor at the particular quick, quiet pace this house teaches everybody within a fortnight of arriving. The linen room is up 3 steps and along on the cold side of the building, north-facing on purpose, because sun yellows white cloth and heat breeds moth. The door is not locked. The presses inside are. It is the pleasantest room you have charge of, and you have never said so to anyone. Deal shelves, scrubbed so often they have gone pale as bone, floor to ceiling on 3 walls, and on those shelves the linen of the house in stacks by the dozen, each stack squared up at the corners, each folded edge outward. Muslin bags of lavender and dried rosemary sit at the back of every shelf. The smell of the room is essentially the smell of nothing, clean cloth and cold air, and a ghost of soap. And it takes an extraordinary quantity of labor to achieve a smell of nothing. On the table by the window lies the inventory book, and this is the real furniture of the room. Every piece in here is marked, not decoratively. In the corner of every sheet, every pillow slip, every towel and cloth, worked in red cotton thread small enough that a guest would have to look for it, there is the letter of the house, a number, and a year. Sheet, best quality, number 41, marked 1879, which tells you, when it comes back from the wash with the middle grown thin enough to show light through, that it has had 4 years of use and is now a pair of pillow slips or a run of dusters cut and hemmed by the sewing maid on a wet afternoon. Nothing in this room is thrown away. Things descend. The counting for today began yesterday and has to be finished before 8. 14 guests in 14 bedrooms. Every bed wants a pair of sheets, a bolster case, 2 pillow slips. That is 14 pairs down, 28 sheets, and because a house party means a change of bed linen midweek whether or not anybody asks for one, you set out 28 more and enter them as reserved. 3 towels to a washstand, 1 large and 2 small, and a huckaback face towel besides, which is 56 towels standing on the shelf where the maids can take them without coming to find you. Then dressing table covers. Then the little linen mats that go under the ewer, because a wet ring on a mahogany top is the kind of thing that ends up mentioned at breakfast. Downstairs there is the other half of the count, table damask for dinner, and the dinner tonight is for 18 at table, which means the long cloth and 2 spare, and 18 large napkins and 18 small, and a slip cloth for the dessert, and doilies for the finger glasses, sideboard cloths. Glass cloths, which are linen, and never anything but linen, because cotton leaves lint on a wine glass, and lint on a wine glass is a visible fact at a candle-lit table. Kitchen rubbers, roller towels, pantry cloths for the butler's man, and the coarse huckaback that goes to the servants' bedrooms in the attic. Before you have laid out a single thing for a single guest, you are handling something near 400 separate pieces of cloth. It is worth stopping on what that costs, because the number is not the sort of thing anybody upstairs has ever needed to know. Good Irish linen, the double damask, and the plain hem-stitched sheeting this house buys comes at something like £1.05 the pair for sheets of the best quality, and more if they are broad enough for a large bed and monogrammed by the linen draper, which the best of them are. A dozen huckaback towels runs to perhaps 18 shillings. Double damask for the table sells by the yard at 7 or 8 shillings, and a cloth long enough to dress a dining table that seats 20 takes a good deal of yardage, and a set of napkins to match it costs as much again. Stand in this room and add the shelves up honestly, and you are standing inside £250 worth of cloth, and possibly nearer 300. Your wage is £60 a year, which is one way of saying something plain about how this household ranks things, but it is also the reason for the marking and the numbering and the book. Linen was not a household expense in the way that candles were an expense. Linen was property. It appeared in inventories when a house changed hands. It was listed in wills, left by name, chests of it, dozens of it, passed from a woman. A well-found country house measured itself partly by the depth of its linen presses, the way it measured itself by its cellar, and a housekeeper who let linen go rotten in a damp cupboard had destroyed capital, not spoiled the washing. That is the weight the little red numbers carry. So you allocate. And here the shelves stop being an inventory and become something more delicate, because the linen in this room is graded, and the grading has to be matched to the guest list without one word of it ever being said aloud. The finest sheets, the ones with the drawn threadwork and the monogram, and there are only 6 pairs of them, go to the best bedroom, which tonight holds a family with a title and land in 2 counties. The next best go to the 2 rooms on either side of it. Plain good linen, unmarked except by the red number, goes to the ordinary run of guests, the cousins, the member of parliament, the couple who came because somebody had to be asked. Older linen, still perfectly sound, thinner at the center, goes to the 2 young men put in the bachelors' rooms at the end of the West Passage, because young men of that sort are given the worst rooms in every house in England and have not yet learned to notice. Cotton sheeting, not linen at all, goes up to the attics for the visiting maids and valets, and coarse cotton to your own housemaids, who wash it themselves. Nobody will inspect a hem, nobody will hold a sheet to the window and count threads. Yet you know, standing here with a stack in your arms, that you are conducting a ranking of 14 households by wealth and precedence, and doing it entirely in cloth, and that if you put the plain sheets in the best bedroom and the drawn threadwork into the bachelors' rooms, nothing whatever would be said, and something would nonetheless have gone wrong. This is a great deal of what the office actually is. Reading a guest list correctly and expressing the reading in objects. The pile you have made will go out of this room, clean, dry, aired, folded, faintly scented, and looking as though cloth simply arrives in that condition. It does not, beyond the kitchen court, past the coal yard and across a gravel walk, there is a separate building with its own chimney, and inside it, a kingdom you have influence over and no direct authority in, which is the laundry. There is a head laundry maid, and under her 2 others, and in a house party week, a woman from the village who comes in by the day. The wash house has 2 coppers built into brick, and they are lit at 4 in the morning on wash day, because water for near 400 pieces of linen does not heat itself in a hurry. Along one wall stand the wooden tubs. In them, the soaking, which is a whole science of its own, sheets steeped overnight in lye, the fine things kept apart from the coarse, the colored things kept apart from everything, table linen with a grease mark on it, treated before it goes near hot water, because hot water on grease sets the stain into the cloth for good. Then the actual washing, a dolly, which is a long wooden implement like a stool on a handle, driven up and down in a tub of scalding water until your shoulders give out, and then driven up and down some more. A washboard for the smaller pieces. Soap cut from a bar with a knife, 3 rinses, and into the last one, a muslin bag of blue, because pure white cloth is not white at all, it is very faintly blue. And every laundress in the country knew that, and every guest who ever admired crisp sheets did not. Wringing by hand, then the box mangle, which is a great wooden crate, weighted with stones running on rollers over the folded linen, and takes 2 women to work. Then the drying ground, lines strung between posts on the far side of the hedge, where no one from the house can see washing, which is itself a piece of architecture with an opinion in it. On a wet March week, when the lines are useless, the drying closet, a room with a stove in it, and slatted racks that pull out like drawers. Then Thursday and Friday, which are ironing, and ironing in this house is not one iron. It is a stove with 6 flat irons heating on it in rotation, so that one is always hot while another cools, and a woman at a padded table working through sheets the size of small sails. Starch, mixed to 3 different strengths, thin for sheets, stiffer for table linen, stiffest for the collars and shirt fronts of the gentlemen, and for the frills, the goffering iron, a little tongue-like thing heated in the fire and run along a ruffle, inch by inch, to set every pleat, 1 frill at a time, an hour at a time, on a garment that will be worn once. The laundry maids earn perhaps £20 a year, the head laundry maid a little over 30. You go back across the court with your arms full, and before you take the pile up, you stop at the one door in this passage you have never once resented opening. The airing cupboard is built against the flue of the back kitchen chimney, slatted shelves, a wooden door that swells in wet weather. Open it, and the heat comes out at you in a soft, dry wall, smelling of warm cloth and cedar and a little of lavender, and it is, honestly, the only genuinely modern comfort in this entire, enormous house. Nothing upstairs is warm like this. The drawing room is warm at one end, and this cupboard is warm all through, all day, all winter. You stand there a moment longer than the work requires, holding 14 households worth of sheets against your apron, and then you shut the door on all that warmth and start up the stairs. You take them up by the back stairs, because there is no version of this morning in which you would take them up any other way. The back stairs are stone, uncarpeted, lit by one narrow window at the half landing that faces the wall of the laundry court, so that the light coming in has already been used by something else. They turn tightly. They were built tight on purpose, to fit into the leftover space between the walls of better rooms, and the treads are worn into shallow dishes in the middle, where 40 years of feet have gone up and down carrying water, coal, cans, trays, ash, sheets. The sound of the house on these stairs is a particular sound: soles, breath, the knock of a scuttle against a stone edge, the small apologetic scrape of 2 people passing on a stair built for one. At the top, the passage runs the whole length of the bedroom floor, and at the end of it there is a door. It is not a handsome door. It is a plain deal door, faced with green baize, tacked on with brass studs in a neat row, hung on a spring so that it closes itself behind you. The baize is there for one reason. Cloth on a door is a silencer. It absorbs the clap of wood against wood, and it swallows the smell of cooking and lamp oil and blacking that lives in the passages behind it. You go through that door perhaps 60 times a day, and every single time it does the same thing to you. On the near side, you are walking at working speed, with your hands full and your voice pitched to carry over a kitchen. On the far side, you are silent, unhurried, walking on carpet, hands folded, and if you meet a guest on that carpet, you will move to the wall and let them pass without looking up. Nobody explained the door to you. It explained itself. Here is something worth understanding about a house like this, because it is the part that gets left out of every admiring description ever written of a great English country house. The arrangement you are walking through was not an accident of old building and awkward additions. It was designed, deliberately, professionally, at expense, by an architect working from a set of published rules, and the rules were written down and sold in books that gentlemen bought and read and argued over. The most influential of them is a fat volume called The Gentleman's House by Robert Kerr, first issued in 1864, 19 years before this morning, and reprinted twice since because it was found so useful. It is a manual for planning a country house, and it devotes an extraordinary amount of its length to the service side. Kerr is quite open about the governing principle. A house of this kind contains two communities under one roof. There is the family and its guests, and there is the household staff, and the object of good planning is to keep those two communities from meeting, except at the exact moments when one is deliberately serving the other, not to keep them apart out of dislike, to keep them apart because visible service is not service. A gentleman ought to be able to sit in his library and have the coal in the grate replenished, the lamp filled, the letters brought, the water heated, the ice broken, and the dinner produced, without at any point being obliged to see the machinery that produces them, or to hear it, or to smell it, or to speak to it beyond a word. Everything about the plan of this house follows from that one requirement, and once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. Consider the distance between the kitchen and the dining room. It is, walking, something close to 180 feet, with 2 turns and a step down. That distance is not carelessness. Kerr and his colleagues were emphatic that the kitchen must be set well away from the principal rooms and preferably angled off the main block entirely, because the smell of roasting meat drifting into a drawing room was considered one of the surest signs of a badly built house. Smell is the thing they were most afraid of. Smell travels through doorways and up stairwells and cannot be shut off, and a smell of dinner arriving before dinner does was thought to spoil the pleasure of dinner arriving at all. So the kitchen is put at the end of a wing, with its own high ceiling and its own ventilating lantern in the roof to draw the fumes up and out, and the food is carried that 180 feet in covered dishes over hot water by young men chosen partly for their steadiness of hand. Consider the stairs. There is the great staircase at the front, oak, wide, turning around a well, hung with pictures of people who are dead. There are these stairs, the ones under your feet, and there is a third stair at the far end of the service wing, narrower still, which exists so that the men who sleep in the basement and the women who sleep in the attics never use the same steps to reach their beds. That was standard planning. The women's bedrooms are at the top of the house, reached through a door which is locked at night, and the keys to it are on the ring at your waist. The men servants sleep on the other side of the building entirely, near the plate room, partly so that somebody is always near the silver. When architects wrote about this, they wrote about it as a matter of good order and propriety, and it was also, in practice, a matter of the household's respectability being a thing the housekeeper carried on a metal ring. Consider the way in. Tradesmen do not come up the drive. There is a back lane, screened by a belt of laurel and holly, planted for exactly that purpose, and it delivers the butcher's cart and the coal and the fish from the station into a walled court on the far side of the house, where nothing can be seen from any window a guest is likely to sit at. In the newer houses of this kind, there are covered ways and sunk passages, tunnels really, running underground from the kitchen court to the offices, so that a man wheeling a barrow of coke crosses the park without appearing in it. This house has a covered way, brick-floored, roofed in slate, 40 yards of it, and in wet weather it is the driest walk in the estate, and the only one nobody with a title has ever set foot in. Consider the windows. The service wing is built lower than the main block, and its roof line is set behind a rise in the ground, so that from the lawn on the south front you see a house of beautiful proportions with no evidence of a kitchen anywhere on it. Where the two parts do meet, there are no windows facing each other. You cannot look out of the still room, and see into the morning room. That was drawn on paper before a single brick was laid. And consider the bells, which is the part of the design you find cleverest and most quietly insulting at the same time. Every principal room has a bell pull, a handle of silk rope or a brass lever beside the fireplace, and behind the wall it moves a system of cranks and wires that runs through the fabric of the building and comes out in the passage outside the kitchen at the bellboard, where 31 little bells hang on coiled springs, each one labeled. Pull the lever in the blue bedroom, and a bell shivers on the board and goes on shivering after it has stopped ringing, so that whoever arrives late can still see which one has been called. What that system means is that nobody upstairs ever has to raise their voice. Nobody has to go to the door and call down a corridor. A person in a chair moves 2 fingers, and 140 feet away and 1 floor down, a girl who has been standing all morning puts down what she was doing and starts walking. Wiring a house for bells was not cheap. Neither were the covered ways, the second and third staircases, the double doors, the extra length of passage, the separate lodgings, the ventilating lantern, the whole enormous back half of the building that no visitor will ever be shown. In a house of this size, the service quarters take up something near half the ground plan, half the floor space, half the roof, half the drains, half the brick, and a great deal more than half the walking. Which brings you to the arithmetic you do sometimes, when you are tired, and which you would not say aloud to anyone. You are walking the length of the bedroom passage now, with the linen in your arms, and you count, because you have counted before and you know the numbers. From the kitchen table to the sideboard in the dining room is 180 feet or so, say 200, with the turns. 20 courses and covers going up and coming back on a night like tonight, in the hands of 4 men making the journey again and again, and you can put the evening at something over 4 miles of walking, indoors, on stone, carrying weight, for the pleasure of 8.5 courses, arriving warm at a table where nobody will remark on the temperature because nobody has ever had it arrive cold. Add the cans of hot water, add the coal, add the ash, add the lamps going down to be trimmed and coming back up to be lit. Add the 60 passages through the baize door. Here is what the plan of this house tells you, if you read it the way you have learned to read it. The distance is not a defect of the design. The distance is the design. A shorter walk would have meant a kitchen nearer the dining room, and a kitchen nearer the dining room would have meant a house in which one could occasionally smell what one was about to eat, and that would have been a lesser house. The 200 yards exist so that the work may be inaudible. Someone drew them on paper, someone paid for them in brick. So the hidden luxury of this place is not the pineapple or the ice or the 40 candles. It is this. It is the fact that the most expensive thing the family ever bought was the concealment itself, and that 30 people spend their lives inside that expense, moving along the inside of a wall so that the house may appear to run on nothing at all. Breakfast for the family goes up at 9, and it is the only meal of the day that is not really served at all. It stands, covered dishes on the sideboard over hot water, kept at heat by the plate warmer and by the footman going in and out with fresh kidneys, bacon, a dish of eggs, cutlets, a cold ham with the fat scraped down to white, a raised pie left from yesterday and improved by the night, toast under a napkin, coffee, tea, a jug of cream that came in at 5 this morning from the dairy. Guests come down when they choose, some of them at 9, some at 10, one of them not before 11, and expecting the eggs to be as they were 2 hours earlier. That is the arrangement upstairs, and upstairs it is called informal. Downstairs it means 2 hours of holding a hot table steady for people arriving at random, which takes more men and more coal than a dinner served to the minute. Nothing in this house is cheaper for being casual. Casual is the expensive kind. You meet the butler in the passage outside the serving room at 9:20, both of you moving at the pace of people who have somewhere to be and no wish to be seen hurrying. He has the newspaper for the master under his arm, ironed. You have the menu book under yours. The two of you divide this house between you along a line neither of you has ever spoken aloud, and you have both walked that line for years without stepping over it. His side is the cellar, the plate, the dining room, the wine, the lamps in the principal rooms, the footmen and their livery, and the front door. Your side is the bedrooms, the linen, the stores, the china, the still room, the housemaids, the laundry, and the keys. He is the senior man. You are the senior woman. In theory, you are equals. In practice, you are two people who have learned that the fastest way through a morning is to tell each other the truth in 8 words and then walk on. He says the smoking room grate wants seeing to. You say it is seen to. He says the second footman is not fit for the dinner and will be behind the screen, not at the table. You say nothing about that at all, because footmen are his, and the one certain way to lose a week is to have an opinion about another servant's servants. The morning room, at 10. The fire in there was laid at 7:30 by a housemaid whose instructions were to be finished and gone before the room was wanted, and she was. Papers on the writing table, the guest list on the blotter in the mistress's hand, with pencil marks beside 3 of the names. She is at the table with the list in front of her, and she says, "Good morning," and you say, "Good morning, madam," and put the book down, open, at today. The menu book is a plain ruled ledger, and the cook has written into it in pencil what she intends to send up: soup, fish, 2 entrees, a joint, game, 2 sweets, an ice, a savory, cheese. In some houses, the cook carries the book up herself. In this house, the cook will not go up the stairs to be questioned about a sauce by a woman who has never made one. So the book comes to me, and I go, and everyone is spared. That arrangement was arrived at 9 years ago without a word being said about it, which is how nearly all the real arrangements in this house were arrived at. What follows is a conversation of perhaps 11 minutes that decides how 30 people will spend their day. The mistress reads down the list. She says she thinks a clear soup rather than the thick, as one of the party is elderly and does not care for anything rich. You say, "Very good, madam," adding that the stock pot is strong today and the clear will be no trouble, which is true, and which also means the thick soup you were not going to make is now her decision rather than your preference. She asks whether the strawberries are fit. You say the gardener will send in what he has, and that there will be enough for a dish if they are not spread among the ices as well. She says then, not among the ices. She asks if the fish came. It came at 8 on the down train, packed in ice, and it is in the larder on a slab under a wet cloth, and you have already seen it and smelled it and satisfied yourself. So you say the fish is very good, madam, and she moves on, satisfied in turn, having satisfied herself by asking a person who would tell her. Understand what is happening here, because it is easy to mistake it for a woman receiving her orders. Every option offered to her this morning is an option that can be delivered. You went into that room, having already spoken to the cook, having already seen the larder and the ice and the fruit, having already counted the beds, and you laid before her a small set of choices, all of which end well. She chooses. She is not being managed, exactly, and she is not being deceived. She is being presented with a workable world and permitted to arrange it. Then she writes nothing down, because she does not need to, because you will carry the whole of it in your head to the kitchen, the still room, the linen room, and the lamp room within the half hour, in the right words for each. The book she keeps is the household book, which you will bring to her at the end of the month, with every shilling entered in your hand. The book she does not keep is the one that would show whose knowledge made the day possible. There is no such book anywhere in the house, and there never will be, and that is not an oversight either. The whole social value of a great house rests on comfort, appearing to be a natural property of the family, like their name. If the arrangement were visible, it would be a business. Kept invisible, it is breeding. She has one more thing. 3 ladies are bringing their own maids, and 2 of the gentlemen their own men. And where are they to sleep? And where are they to eat? You tell her. 2 maids in the room above the housemaid's passage, 1 in the little room by the linen store, the men over the stables with the grooms, and the 2nd footman moved in with the 1st for the week. She says thank you, and that will do very well, and you close the book. Now the shape of the household, laid out flat, because the day you have just arranged runs along its seams, and you cannot see the day without seeing them. At the head, the butler and yourself. He has £70 a year, you have 60, both with board and a private room. Then the cook, 45, and worth more, and aware of it. The lady's maid has 30, and her mistress's cast-off dresses, which are worth as much again, and she stands entirely outside the ordinary chain of command. She is paid out of the mistress's own account. She takes orders from her lady, and from nobody else. She eats in the servants' hall, but sits near the top of the table, and does not scrub anything ever. The valet is the same on the men's side. Then the footmen, 3 of them, £28 each with their livery found, chosen partly for height. Then the housemaids, 4, at £16 and £18, the still-room maid, at 14, the kitchen maid at 18, the scullery maid at 11, who is 16 years old and does the roughest work in the building, 2 laundry maids out beyond the yard at 20 each, because laundry is heavy and skilled and hard to keep staffed, the dairymaid, the odd man, who carries coal and water and cleans boots and knives and does everything nobody else's title covers. Outdoors is a separate country. The head gardener has a cottage, a wage above yours, 4 men under him and a boy, and answers to the master or to the land agent, not to you or to the butler. The coachman is the same, the gamekeeper is the same, and considers himself the equal of any man in the house. When you want fruit, you ask the gardener, as one head of department asks another, and you do it courteously, because he cannot be ordered, and everybody involved knows it. The seams are these, between the butler and yourself, over the footman's time, because he wants them in the dining room, and you want them carrying and shifting, between the cook and yourself, over the stores, because she wants a free hand in a locked room, between the lady's maid and everyone, because she has a lady's manners and a maid's wages and belongs nowhere, between indoors and outdoors, over anything that grows, between the top of the servants' hall and the bottom of it, which is a gap in money of £50 a year and a gap in prospects considerably wider than that. 30-odd people then. Wages for the year, Come to something over £600 before a mouthful of the food they eat is counted. That is the machinery, and you have just spent 11 minutes at a writing table with a pencil deciding where all of it goes today, in a conversation that will be remembered upstairs, if at all, as an agreeable chat about the soup. You leave the morning room and go along the corridor, past the flowers on the hall table, past the case of stuffed birds, down the 3 steps, and through the green baize door, which closes behind you with its own spring and its own small sigh of felt. And you feel your face change. In the front of the house, it is a still face, pleasant, attentive, giving nothing. On this side of the door, it becomes a working face, quicker and harder and considerably less patient, because there is a scullery maid to be spoken to about a copper pan, a lamp in the blue room that smokes and must be dealt with before 4 o'clock, 14 beds, and a clear soup to be got to a table 200 yards away, hot. The kitchen is the hottest room in Wiltshire and one of the tallest, and both of those facts are deliberate. It sits at the end of its own passage, in its own small building, joined to the house by a covered way, and its ceiling goes up 2 full stories to a louvered lantern in the roof that stands open in all weathers to let the heat and the steam and the smell of roasting go straight up and out over the kitchen court, where nobody who matters will ever stand. High windows set well above eye level, whitewashed walls, a floor of stone flags that has been scrubbed so often that the softer stones have worn into shallow dishes. At the far end, the range. It is a closed range, cast iron, 9 feet of it, with the fire boxed in behind bars, and a flue drawing hard, an oven on either side, and a hot closet below, and a boiler at the back that gives the kitchen its own supply of hot water. It was put in 11 years ago, and it cost more than the cook earns in 3 years. This morning, it is banked and burning steady, which is a thing the kitchen maid has been up since 5:30 to achieve, because a range of that size does not come to an even heat in 20 minutes. Beside it, on a bench of its own, stands the charcoal stove, low and open, used for nothing but sauces, because charcoal gives a heat you can nurse, and a range gives a heat you can only endure. Along the wall opposite the windows hangs the batterie, copper, all of it, in graduated sizes from a stockpot you could bath a child in, down to a saucepan that holds half a pint, each one tinned white on the inside, each one stamped on the base with the number of the house. Stew pans, sauté pans, preserving pans, a fish kettle, a turbot kettle shaped like a diamond, 3 braising pans with sunken lids, and above them, on their own rack, the moulds. Copper glows when it is kept, and it is kept. That wall is the single most valuable object in the building that is not silver, and the reason it shines is a girl of 15 with a bowl of sand. By 10:30, the kitchen is loud in a way the front of the house cannot imagine. Not shouting, mostly. A hard, continuous working noise. Knives on the deal table, which is scrubbed white and 18 feet long. The dry rattle of the coffee mill. Somebody pounding in a mortar, which takes 20 minutes and shoulders. The oven door going. The cook's voice cutting across all of it, twice, in 2 words each time. The cook is 51. She has been in 3 great houses before this one, and she is the second highest paid person under this roof, after the butler, at £70 a year, which is 10 more than you. You are aware of the £10 every day of your life, and you have never once mentioned it. Her temper is a fact of household weather, like the wind coming off the downs, and you plan around it in the same spirit. On a day with 14 guests arriving, a house party dinner to be sent out at 8, and a lamb that came in yesterday and has not hung long enough for her liking, you do not go into her kitchen to discuss the stores. You go in for one thing, you get it settled, and you go out. What you have come for is ice. Here is the thing most people never think about when they picture a Victorian dinner table with a molded cream on it, glossy and cold, in the middle of March. There is no machine anywhere in this house that makes cold. Not one. Cold is not something the building produces. Cold is something the estate harvested 2 months ago, on a specific week, in specific weather, and has been holding ever since, like money in a strongbox. Go out through the kitchen court and along the path into the shrubbery on the north side, where the laurels are thick and nothing gets full sun, and there is a low brick arch set into a bank of earth with a wooden door, and behind that door a passage of about 12 feet with a second door at the far end, so that the two are never open at once. Beyond the second door, the floor drops away, and you are standing at the lip of a brick pit, egg-shaped, 20 feet deep, and lined with a double wall, sunk almost entirely below the ground, with a domed top mounded over in earth and turf. There is a drain at the bottom. The drain matters more than anything else about it, and the men who built this in the 1790s knew that better than the family did. The ice went in during the second week of January. The lake at the bottom of the park froze thick enough by the 6th, and the head gardener sent word up, and for 4 days, every man on the estate who could be spared was on that lake with saws and boat hooks and long iron bars, breaking the sheet into slabs, floating them to the bank, hauling them out, and carting them up the hill. Down in the pit, 2 men stood in the cold, and broke the slabs smaller, and rammed the pieces down with mallets, and packed straw between the layers and up against the walls, and they went on until the pit was filled and mounded over. It is unpleasant, heavy, wet work done in the worst weather of the year, and it is the reason there will be iced pudding at dinner in July. The physics of it are not complicated, but they are exact. A pit holds cold in proportion to its mass, so it must be filled full or it holds badly. It must be sunk deep, because the earth around it is cold and steady all year. The walls are doubled with a cavity, and the top is mounded with earth and planted over, and the 2 doors and the passage between them mean that warm air never gets a straight run at the ice. And the meltwater, which there will always be, must be able to leave immediately, because ice sitting in its own water goes far faster than ice sitting dry. A well-built pit loses perhaps a quarter of what you put in over the course of a year. A badly drained one loses the lot by August, and there is nothing you can do about it except wait for winter. 2 winters ago, the lake did not freeze. It froze at the edges and mizzled for 6 weeks, and the pit went into spring, holding what the estate had scraped up from a couple of hard nights, which was perhaps a fifth of what it wanted. So the family bought ice. It came from Norway, cut out of a freshwater lake near the coast, packed in sawdust in the hold of a collier, landed at a south coast port, and brought up the line in an insulated wagon to the station 4 miles away from where the estate carted it. It arrived in blocks the size of a hearthstone, blue-green and clean, ringing when you knocked it. That was the year you learned that the thing the family imagines to be free, because it falls out of the sky onto their own water, has a price attached to it the moment the weather fails. Nobody upstairs ever discussed it with you. It came off the household account as carriage and cartage, and you entered it and said nothing. So 10:30, and the kitchen wants ice, and you have the key. The under-gardener's boy comes up with a barrow and a sack, and the ice is broken out of the mound with a pick, and the pieces are wrapped in straw and covered over and carried across the court at a trot, because every yard of that journey costs you something. In the kitchen, it goes into the wooden ice tub in the corner, and the lid goes on, and part of it is broken smaller still and pounded in a canvas bag with a wooden mallet, which is a job for the strongest arm in the room, and then mixed with rough salt, because ice alone will only chill, and ice with salt will freeze. What comes of it, tonight, is this: a cream, flavored with vanilla and a little maraschino, frozen in a pewter pot, set down in the salt and ice, turned by hand, and scraped down from the sides with a spatula every few minutes for the better part of an hour, so that it freezes smooth instead of into a block of grit. Then packed into a copper mold shaped like a pineapple, the two halves buttered at the seam so nothing leaks, and buried in fresh ice and salt for 2 hours more. Then turned out, at the last possible minute, onto a cold dish, standing up perfectly, faintly beaded with frost, and carried 200 yards along a covered passage and up a stair by a footman, walking as fast as he dares. There will also be a jelly, set in a mold with a spire on it. Ice in the wine pails in the dining room, ice under the fish, butter kept firm in a cooler, the champagne in its own pail, with the ice packed round the shoulders of the bottle rather than under it, because the butler is particular and correct. Reckon up what that one pineapple-shaped cream costs, and you get a number nobody at the table would believe. Cream, a good deal of it, at something like 1.08 the quart. Eggs, sugar broken off the loaf and pounded. A spoonful of a liqueur that comes out of a locked cupboard. The ice itself, which cost 4 days of 8 men's labor in January and is being spent, permanently, in an hour. And the mold. That copper pineapple was made by a firm in London, tinned inside, and it cost something in the region of £2. There are perhaps 30 molds on the rack above the battery, and the whole copper wall, valued honestly, comes to the best part of £150, which is 2.5 years of the cook's wages hanging on 8 iron hooks. It has to be retinned every few years by a man who comes out from Salisbury, and the bill for that is entered under repairs, and the family does not read that line either. Then there is the labor, which never appears in any account at all. Say 5 hours of somebody's hands, spread across the kitchen and the scullery and the court and the shrubbery, for a dish that will be admired for perhaps 4 seconds, cut into 14 portions, and half of it sent back down, because everyone has already eaten 7 courses. You look at the corner of the scullery on your way out. The door is open onto the sink, which is stone, and set low and full of grey water. The scullery maid is standing at it with her sleeves pinned back above the elbow and her apron soaked through at the front, doing the copper. Sand, a little soft soap, a rag, and her whole weight behind her right arm. 14 years old, £8 a year, and her keep. She has been at that sink since 6, and she will be at it, on and off, until 9 tonight, and the sound she makes is the sound this house is built on and never hears. A slow, gritty, circling rasp, sand on copper, until the inside of the pan comes up bright. The kitchen court in March holds cold the way a well holds water, so you cross it quickly, with your list in your hand and your shawl pulled over the keys to stop them ringing. The list is short, and it has taken thought. Fruit for 2 dinners, flowers for the hall and the drawing room, and every guest bedroom, something for the table on Thursday that will make the mistress glad she asked for it, and not make the head gardener feel that he has been ordered about by a woman who has never grown anything in her life. The walled garden lies beyond the stable arch, 4 acres of it, brick on all 4 sides, and higher on the north than the south. You go in through the door in the wall, and the temperature changes at once, 3 or 4 degrees at least, because that is what the brick is for. A wall that thick takes the sun all day and gives it back all night, and the whole enclosure sits in its own private climate, a fortnight ahead of the fields outside it. Along the south face, the peaches are trained flat against the warm brick, with their buds just showing pink. The paths are gravel, raked, not one weed anywhere, which is not luck. The head gardener is at the far end by the frame yard, and he sees you come in, and he does not hurry. This is a negotiation, and you both know the terms of it. He is 51. He earns £80 a year, and a cottage with a garden of his own, which is £20 more than you get, and a house besides. And he answers to the master directly, not to you, not to the butler, not to anybody indoors. Under him are 3 journeymen, at something under £1 a week, and 2 young improvers who sleep in the bothy by the boiler house and take their turn, sitting up with the fires. Everything that comes through the baize door in the way of fruit and flowers and vegetables comes because he has agreed to send it up. Nothing you can say makes him, so you never say must, and you never say the mistress wants, unless you have to, and you keep the last one in reserve, the way you keep the plate-room key in your pocket, rather than on the ring. You ask him what he can spare. He tells you what he can spare, which is slightly less than he actually can, and you ask about the strawberries as though you had only just thought of them, and he says they are coming, and after a while he takes you to look. Now this is worth slowing down for, because the glass at the top of this garden is the most extravagant thing on the whole estate, and none of the 14 people arriving this afternoon will look at it, or think about it, or know it exists. There are 5 houses in the range, all lean-to against the north wall, all under glass, all heated. The nearest is the early vinery. Inside, the air is close and green, and smells of warm earth and slightly of sulphur, and the vines are trained overhead on wires under the glass, and there is fruit on them, grapes, in March, small yet and hard, and green as gooseberries, but set and swelling, and by the middle of May they will be black Hamburgs on the table, with the bloom still on them, and by then the mistress will consider them ordinary. At the far end of the range, in the cool fruit room, the last of the autumn's muscats are still hanging, each bunch cut with a length of woody stem, and the stem pushed into a little bottle of water clipped to the rack, which keeps a grape alive and plump for 4 months after the vine has finished with it. The bottles have to be topped, and the berries looked over, one by one, every few days, and any that has gone must be snipped out with scissors so it does not spoil its neighbors. That is somebody's afternoon, twice a week, all winter. The second house is the peach house. The third and fourth are the strawberries and the forcing pit, and the fifth is the pinery. The strawberries are the ones I want you to see properly. They are not in the ground. They are in pots, hundreds of pots, in tiers on staging, each plant raised last summer from a runner, and grown on, and rested, and then brought into heat in succession, a batch at a time, so that fruit arrives in a steady line, rather than all at once. The leaves are a strange soft color under glass. The flowers have been pollinated by hand, every one of them, by a young man with a camel hair brush, going along the staging in the middle of the day when the air is dry, because there are no bees in here in February. The earliest pots are showing fruit now, still white at the tip, and in 8 or 9 days you will be able to send up a dish of strawberries while there is frost on the park and nothing at all in the hedges. The pinery is the last house and the hottest, and you have to stand a moment inside the door to let your eyes adjust. Pineapples do not want warm air, particularly. They want warm feet, so they sit in pots, sunk to their rims in a deep pit of tan bark, the spent bark from a tanner's yard, packed down and left to ferment, and the fermenting bark makes a steady bottom heat of 75 or 80 degrees for weeks together, month after month, without a fire under it at all. The pit has to be renewed and forked over and tested with a hand pushed down into it, and if it heats too fiercely, it will scorch the roots, and a plant is lost that has been 18 months in the growing. 2 years is what it takes, from the crown of one fruit to the cutting of the next. 2 years of watering with water that has been stood in a tank to take the chill off. 2 years of shifting into bigger pots. 2 years of somebody being right about the bark. And the heat, in all 5 houses, comes from one boiler house, dug in behind the north wall, and hot water in 4-inch iron pipes running the whole length of the range under the staging. Somebody stokes that boiler at 10 at night, and somebody looks at it again at 2 in the morning, and in a hard frost, somebody sits up with it, because the difference between a cold snap managed and a cold snap not managed is the entire year's fruit. There are thermometers hung in every house, and a slate by the door where the night readings are written down. Over the glass go mats and wooden shutters at dusk, rolled out by hand, rolled back by hand at first light. In the day, the sashes are propped open an inch or 2 on the leeward side and shut again the moment the wind turns, and that is not a task with a time attached to it. It is a man watching the sky all day and getting up from his dinner. Reckon the cost of it honestly, because the number is the only way to see the thing clearly. The coal for the garden is bought separately from the coal for the house and entered on its own account, and it comes to something over £50 in the year, which is nearly what I am paid to run everything under the main roof. The glass itself, the range as it stands, went up in the last 20 years at a cost the master has never mentioned in my hearing, and which cannot have been less than several £100. Add the labour, add the 2 years of a pineapple, then set beside all of that the plain fact that the fishmonger's cart from Salisbury brings imported pineapples up from the docks now, out of the Azores and the West Indies, in quantity, and a shop pine can be had for a few shillings, and there are London grocers selling them cheaper than that. So a hothouse pineapple in 1883 is not food. It is a statement, and everybody at the table can read it. Anybody with money can buy a pine. Only a house with 4 acres of walled garden, a boiler, a bark pit, and a man who understands both can grow one, and the shape of a homegrown fruit is different, and the smell of it when it is cut is different, and the guests who know about such things will know. There was a fashion, not so long ago, for hiring a pineapple by the day for the center of the table, sending it back uneaten, and paying a good deal for the loan of it, and that tells you everything about what the fruit was for. Nobody at this dinner will say a word about any of it. That is the point. To remark on the difficulty would be to admit that anything had been difficult. You come out of the pinery, and the head gardener has decided, in his own time, to be generous. You will have grapes on Thursday. You will have the first of the strawberries at the end of next week, 3 dozen if the sun holds, and he will not promise beyond that. Flowers he will send up this afternoon, and he tells you which, and you write them down, and do not argue about the lilies. One of the journeymen brings the fruit for tonight to the garden door in a shallow basket, and here is the last piece of the trick. The grapes are lifted with a pair of scissors, and never with fingers, because a thumbprint takes the bloom off a berry, and you cannot put it back. They are laid on vine leaves, cut fresh, and covered with more leaves, and the basket is carried by hand across the court, and in at the back kitchen, and up to the fruit room, and it does not go on a cart, and it is not set down hard. Nothing about it will be labelled. It will appear on the table between the candles at 9 o'clock, as though grapes in March were simply what grapes do. You stop for 1 second on the way out, at the door of the stovehouse, because you always do. The air that comes past you is thick and wet, and smells of hot iron and tan bark, and the sweetish green of growing things, and outside it is 38 degrees, with a wind off the downs and rooks going over the wall in the grey, 2 feet apart. That is all the distance there is between March and July here, and it is held open by a boiler and a man who gets up at 2 in the morning. You pull the door to behind you. It shuts on all that warmth with a soft wooden knock, and the cold takes your face again, and you go back across the gravel to the house. By 2:15, the guest floor has gone quiet, in a particular way that is not the same as empty. There are 8 bedrooms and 3 dressing rooms along the south corridor, and behind 5 of those doors somebody is working, and you cannot hear them. That is the standard. A housemaid moving through a finished room at this hour makes about as much noise as a cat, and she has been taught to, and it is one of the things she will never be praised for. You start at the far end, by the window that looks down on the gravel, and you work back toward the stairs. The bed is made up with the linen you chose at 7 this morning, and it has been aired first, which matters more than any other thing in this room. A bed in a country house in March is guilty until proven innocent. The sheets came from the airing cupboard and went onto the mattress warm, and a stone bottle of hot water has been in the bed for an hour and taken out again, and the housemaid has put her own bare forearm between the sheets to test them, because that is the only instrument anyone has for the purpose. A damp bed is the single failure the family will hear about. Nobody remarks on a dry one. Then the washstand, which is a small factory of its own, marble top, mahogany surround, and on it the full set in matching china, the ewer, the basin, the soap dish, the sponge bowl, the brush tray, the tumbler, and the water bottle for drinking, which is not the same water as the water for washing, and must never be confused. The ewer is filled cold now, and will be emptied and filled hot at 6:30 from a brass can carried up the back stairs. Beside the stand, the towel horse with 3 towels on it, graded from a rough huckaback for the body to something soft and worn for the face, and a bath towel folded over the lower rail. Under the bed, out of sight but within reach, the hip bath if the guest has asked for one, and behind the door in a curtained recess, the rest of the necessary apparatus of a house that has no plumbing above the ground floor. That is worth being plain about, because it is the part of the arrangement that gets tidied out of the pretty version. There are 2 water closets in the house, both downstairs, both awkwardly placed. Upstairs there is china, and there are lids, and there is a housemaid on the back stairs at 7:45 every morning with a covered pail, going down to the slop sink in the closet at the end of the service passage, and she will do it again at 11 and again in the afternoon. The whole system depends on her being on that staircase at the right minute, and never on the wrong one. If a guest coming out of his room at the wrong hour meets a maid carrying anything at all, the illusion tears, and the illusion is the product. So the timings are written in your head like a railway table, and the maids keep to them, and in 14 years I have known it go wrong perhaps twice. Everything else in the room is stage dressing, and I mean that in the working sense, not as a figure of speech. A guest bedroom is set, exactly as a scene is set, with properties placed where a hand will fall on them without searching. Coal in the box, filled and not merely topped, with the tongs and the small shovel and the hearth brush laid straight. Matches in a china holder on the chimney piece, and a spill vase beside it. 2 candlesticks with fresh wax candles, and a candle box in the drawer with more, because a guest who reads in bed will burn through one. On the writing table, 6 sheets of the house paper and 6 envelopes, counted out, with blotting paper, a pen, a nib box, and the inkwell filled that morning, and not last week, because ink left standing goes thick, and a thick pen is remembered. A pincushion, a card of hairpins, a boot jack, the looking glass turned so that it takes the light from the window and not from behind, which is a detail nobody thanks you for, and everybody notices when it is wrong. Flowers come up last, from the gardener's basket. Not lilies, because the smell fills a closed room overnight, and half the world cannot sleep in it. Narcissus in a low glass, and a few sprigs of something green, and they go on the table between the window and the bed where the light will find them at 8 in the morning. Above all of it hangs the question of light, and this is where the hidden machinery of a country house is at its least visible and most laborious. There is no gas in this house, there is no electric light in this house, and there will not be for another decade, and when it comes it will be argued about for 2 years first. What there is instead is a room on the ground floor of the service wing, no bigger than a pantry, with a stone floor and a window that opens and a long deal table, and on that table every morning of the year stand between 40 and 50 lamps. Paraffin lamps, mostly, with glass reservoirs and flat wicks and tall chimneys, and every single one of them has to be handled every single day. The reservoir is filled from a can, and it must not be overfilled, because oil that creeps up round the collar will smoke and smell, and a smell of oil in a drawing room is a household disgrace. The wick is drawn up, and the charred edge trimmed flat with a scissors, level and true, because a wick cut crooked burns crooked and blackens the glass in 20 minutes. The chimney is washed in warm water and dried and polished with newspaper, because a cloth leaves lint. The globe is washed, the burner is picked clean, the brass is rubbed, then the lamp goes back on the table in its place, and the next one is lifted down. 4 minutes a lamp if you are quick, and no lamp is a fair test, because the standing lamps in the hall take longer, so call it 3 hours of somebody's morning, every morning, before a single one of them is lit. Add the candles, wax for the family and the guest rooms at something like 1 shilling and 8pence the pound, composite for the passages, and the ends of everything collected in a box and weighed and accounted for, because candle ends are one of the classic small thefts, and everybody knows it. Add the carrying. At dusk, the lamps go up to the rooms they belong in the hands of a footman and the lamp boy, one at a time, lit up the back stairs, and at 11 or 12 they come down again to be done over. So when the 14 people arriving on the 4 o'clock carriages walk into their bedrooms tonight and find them soft with light, what they are standing inside is roughly a man-day of work in glass and oil, repeated tomorrow, and repeated the day after, and never once mentioned by anyone at the table. Back to the corridor then, and to what I actually do in these rooms, which is look for the 4 or 5 things a guest will never see and would feel. I put my hand flat on the sheet, 6 inches down from the pillow, in the middle where the cold sits. I look under the valance, along the floor by the skirting, because dust gathers there, and a lady's maid unpacking on her knees will find it and will mention it in the servants' hall of some other house 6 weeks from now, and that is how a house gets its reputation. I count the hooks and hangers in the wardrobe against how many trunks I expect, and I put more in if the number is thin. I pull the bell rope once, gently, and listen for the wire, because a bell that does not answer in the passage is worse than no bell at all. I open the window an inch and shut it again to know that the sash will move, and I look up the chimney to see the daylight in it. I lift the water bottle and change it if it has been standing since morning. I open the top drawer and smell it. In the 3rd room, I find a smear on the glass over the chimney piece, a wide, dull streak where a cloth went round once and not twice, and I take my own handkerchief out of my pocket, and I take it off, and I say nothing to anyone about it, then or later. She has 11 rooms to finish before 4 o'clock, and she is the youngest in the house, and she has been up since 5, and the cost of telling her is a whole afternoon of her being careful in the wrong direction. The cost of my handkerchief is nothing. There is a kind of authority that consists almost entirely of knowing which faults to mend with your own hands, and never name. By 3 o'clock, the corridor is finished. Doors open, rooms standing ready, and I walk it once more, from end to end, without going in. Each room is silent and warm, and the fire is laid but not lit, and the light is coming off the marble of the washstand and off the water in the glass, and the whole length of it looks as though nothing has happened here in 100 years. That is the effect. That is the entire object of the exercise. And I can tell you exactly what stands behind one of those doors, because I could put names to them if names were the custom. 2 housemaids, for the beds and the grates and the dusting and the carrying. The laundry maids who washed and dried and mangled and folded that linen last week, and the woman who ironed the pillow slips with a flat iron off the stove and a damp cloth. The sewing maid who darned the hem of the 3rd sheet in February so neatly that you have to be looking for it. The odd man who carried the coal for the box up the back stairs. The gardener who cut the narcissus, and the boy who brought them across the court. The lamp boy and the footman for the light. The man who pumps the water into the roof cistern that fills the ewer. Whoever boiled the can of hot water that will come up at 6:30. 11 people, near enough, and 3 days of work between them, so that a room can look as if it simply happened to be comfortable. The first of them arrives at 20 minutes past 4, and I know it from the gravel before anyone announces it, because the sound a carriage makes on the front drive is different from the sound a cart makes coming into the kitchen court, and after 12 years in one house, you learn to hear the difference through 2 walls and a closed window. The brougham has been down to meet the 3:40 train, and the wagonette behind it, and the luggage cart behind that, 4 miles each way, and the coachman will do the run again for the later train, and again after that, if the last party misses their connection at the junction, which they usually do. 6 guests in the first wave, 2 men, 3 ladies, and a girl of 19, making her first visit to a house of this size, who will spend the whole of the next hour looking at the ceilings. In the hall, the butler is at the door, with 2 footmen behind him in their afternoon coats, and the mistress comes out of the drawing room at exactly the right moment, which is to say, the moment after the first guest is properly inside and out of the cold, but before she has finished taking off her gloves. That timing is not accidental. It has been managed, and the butler managed it, and I know precisely what he did to manage it, which was to send a boy to the top of the west lawn with instructions to walk back at a normal pace the moment he saw the carriage lamps turn in at the lodge. My own place in this is at the foot of the back stairs, in the passage, where I can see the hall through the doorway without standing in it. That is the whole of my part in the arrival of 14 guests. I am not introduced. I am not spoken to. I am not, strictly speaking, present. And yet nothing that happens in the next 4 hours can happen unless I am standing exactly there, because the moment a trunk comes off that cart, I have to know whose it is, which room it belongs in, and which of the visiting servants is going up the stairs with it. Here is the thing about the entrance hall of a country house on an arrival day. It looks like a welcome. It is, in fact, a sorting mechanism, and it sorts every human being who comes through the door into one of 2 streams that will not touch again until the carriages leave at the end of the week. The guests go up the great staircase, slowly, talking, stopping to look at a portrait, being shown where the fires are. Their luggage goes up the back stairs at speed, on the shoulders of the odd man and the second footman and the coachman's boy. Along the passage I walked at 3 o'clock, in through the doors of rooms that will not be entered from the front for another 10 minutes. A well-run arrival means that when a lady reaches her bedroom, her trunk is already there, already open, and her own maid is already unpacking it. She has been traveling since 11 in the morning. It should feel to her as though the room has been waiting quietly for her all afternoon, and as though her possessions have somehow traveled ahead of her by a means she does not need to consider. And in that unpacking is the part of a house party that nobody outside the service wing ever thinks about at all, because the guests do not arrive alone. They arrive with their servants, and those servants are now mine. Count them for me. Of the 14 coming today, 5 of the ladies keep a maid and travel with her. 3 of the gentlemen keep a valet. That is 8 additional people in this house for 6 nights. 8 people to be fed 3 times a day and given a bed and a place to sit and a place to wash. 8 people who do not answer to me in any binding sense and cannot be corrected by me if they misbehave, and who will be gone in a week. A second household appears inside my household, fully formed, and I have to make room for it without disturbing a single arrangement upstairs. The beds are the first difficulty. Visiting maids go in with our own housemaids, 2 to a bed in the attic if it comes to it, and it does come to it, and nobody enjoys it. Visiting valets go over into the bachelor passage on the men's side, past the door that is locked at night, and if there are more men than beds, we put up camp bedsteads, which are canvas and iron and fold flat, and which live in a cupboard on the top landing for exactly this purpose. There is a housemaid in this house who has slept on the floor of the sewing room 3 times in my memory, because a duchess brought 2 maids instead of 1, and no explanation was ever offered for the second maid, and none was ever asked for. The second difficulty is the table, and the table is worse, because the table involves rank. You need to understand how precedence works in a servants' hall, and it is the part of country house life that reads most strangely now. A servant's standing in that room is not determined by her own experience, or her wages, or her age, or her skill. It is determined by the rank of the person she serves. A visiting valet whose master is an earl sits above a visiting valet whose master is a baronet. A lady's maid to a peeress goes in to supper ahead of a lady's maid to the wife of a member of Parliament. This is not a joke made by the servants about their betters. It is observed seriously, and it is observed by them, and a mistake in the order of it can sour a whole week. So on the evening of an arrival, there is a small piece of diplomacy to be done in my own sitting room with the butler over the guest list, working out who goes where and in what order, and it has nothing whatever to do with what any of these people can actually do. I know for a fact that the maid arriving today with the second of the 3 carriage parties can dress hair better than anyone else who will be in this building this week, and can turn a bodice inside out and remake it overnight, and she will sit halfway down the table because her mistress married a man with no title and a great deal of money. Meanwhile, the upper servants of this house sit where we always sit, the butler at the head, myself at the foot, the cook and the lady's maid and the visiting servants of the highest-ranking guests ranged nearest to us, and the housemaids and the still-room maid and the scullery maid down the middle and the far end. We eat the first part of supper in the hall, all together, for the sake of order and the setting of an example, and then those of us at the top withdraw to my room for the cheese and the rest of it, and the noise level in the hall behind us goes up by half the moment the door closes, and I have never once turned back to complain about it. And there is one more thing that comes into the house with the visiting servants, and it is money. And it is the reason a good many of them are pleasant to me all week. At the end of a visit, the departing guest tips the servants of the house who have attended them. A gentleman leaves something for the footman who valeted him if he came without a man of his own, and for the housemaid who did his room, and for the coachman who drove him, and for the boy who cleaned his boots. 1/2 crown for a small service, 5 shillings for a good week, a sovereign from a very grand or very careless guest, which is a week's wages to a housemaid, and more than that to a girl in the scullery. Set that against the wages properly, and you see why it matters so much. A housemaid in this house is paid perhaps £18 in the year, in cash, quarterly, with her board and her beer money and 2 print dresses. A week of a full house, well tipped, can put 10 or 12 shillings in her pocket, which is a fortnight's earnings, and which she will send home or sew into the lining of her box. So a house party is not only labour, it is the closest thing to piecework that domestic service offers, and the maids know within a shilling which visiting families are generous and which are not, and they know it before the carriages have come up the drive, because the information travels between houses through the servants who move with their employers from visit to visit all season. That is the shadow household. 8 extra people, a rearranged table, a set of beds I did not have this morning, and an entire economy of small silver running underneath the week that no one in the drawing room will ever mention out loud. At 5 o'clock, I go back along the passage, and the bellboard has started. It runs along the wall above the door, and there is a bell for every principal room in the house, 31 of them, each on its own coiled wire, with the room painted underneath, in black letters on cream. When a bell is pulled, the wire lifts it and it rings, and then it goes on swinging afterwards for half a minute or so, which is the cleverest part of the whole arrangement, because it means that if you come into the passage a little late, you can still see which bell was rung by looking for the one still moving. Blue room, then the west room, twice, then the chintz room, and then blue again. I stand under it with my hands folded, and I read the house from where I am. The west room wants hot water, and wants it twice, because the maid there has been sent down and has not been given enough. The chintz room has found the fire lit, but the coal box short, which is my fault and will be corrected in 90 seconds. Blue room, ringing twice, inside 4 minutes, means a lady who is nervous about the time and has not yet realized the dressing bell has not gone. Nobody upstairs is shouting. Nobody upstairs has to. The bells do all of it, and the bells are the reason a guest can want something at 5 in the afternoon and have it appear beside her without ever once seeing the corridor it came down. The dressing gong goes at 7:30, and the house changes key. It is a brass gong on a stand in the front hall, and one of the footmen carries the stand and walks it slowly along the principal corridor, striking it as he goes, so that the sound arrives at every bedroom door in turn. It is not a loud noise. It is a warm, spreading, unhurried noise, and it means that the guests now have half an hour to be dressed, and it means that upstairs the maids are already moving again, with cans under flannel, and that in the dressing rooms the valets have laid out shirts and studs and are standing by with a brush. Below, it means something else entirely. It means the kitchen has 30 minutes and the passage has to be clear. The dining room has been ready since 5. I looked at it myself at 7:15, standing in the doorway with my hands folded, and I will tell you what a guest sees when the doors open at 8 o'clock, because a guest sees a finished thing, and I see the day that made it. A long mahogany table, covered with damask so thick and so heavily starched that it holds a fold like paper. Down the center, an epergne, which is a tall branched silver stand, and in the arms of it grapes and a pineapple and moss, with maidenhair fern trailing down onto the cloth. 2 candelabra of 7 lights each, wax, not tallow, because wax does not smell and does not gutter and costs about 4 times as much. Silver at each place, laid outward, in the order it will be used, which is a small kindness to anyone unsure of the sequence. 4 glasses to a place, and a 5th brought later. A menu card in a silver holder, written out that afternoon in the cook's French, which is a French of her own but perfectly legible. Flowers in low silver bowls, low so that no one has to look round them at anybody, lamplight in the corners, and candlelight on the table, and the whole room smelling of beeswax and hothouse fruit and hot linen. To a woman coming in on the arm of a stranger at 8 o'clock, that room looks like something the house does by nature. It looks like a room that has always been lit and always been set and always had grapes in March. Nobody entering it counts anything. I will count for you. Dinner in this house is served in the newer way, the Russian fashion, which is what the fashionable world went over to in the middle of the century, and what every large house has adopted by now. The older way, the French way, put the dishes on the table all together, in 2 or 3 great removes, and the gentlemen carved, and the ladies helped their neighbors, and a good deal of it sat there going cold, while people admired the look of it. The Russian way puts nothing on the table but flowers and fruit and glass. Every dish is carved and portioned at the sideboard or in the serving room, and handed to each diner in turn by a man from the left. It is a more elegant thing to watch, and a far more comfortable thing to eat, and it multiplied the labor of dinner by something close to 3. Consider only the plates. Under the old arrangement, a diner used perhaps 4 or 5. Tonight, with a soup, a fish, 2 entrees, the roast, a game course, 2 sweets, a savory, and dessert. Each of 18 people will use a dozen plates, and every one of the hot ones must arrive hot. There is no such thing as a warm plate that arrived warm by accident. It came out of a hot closet in the serving room, which is an iron cupboard heated by its own small stove, kept going from 6 in the evening, and stacked and restacked all night by a boy whose entire occupation for 4 hours is the temperature of China. Then consider the distance. I told you this morning about the 200 yards. Every dish in this dinner travels it, out of the kitchen, under a domed silver cover, along the flagged passage, up the 7 steps, through the second door, into the serving room, and there it waits under its cover on the hot closet while the last course is cleared, and only then does it go through the last door into the light. 7 courses, 4 or 5 dishes to several of them, going up in relay, in order, without collision, along a corridor, built deliberately long so that nothing of the kitchen should reach the table but the food, which is why the covers exist at all. People think a silver dish cover is grandeur. A silver dish cover is a lid, and it is there because the food has 150 yards of cold stone to cross. Then count the men, because that is the part that is engineered like machinery. Good service in a house like this is reckoned at roughly 1 man to every 2 or 3 at table. 18 at table wants 6 or 7 pairs of hands in the room. We keep 4 indoor men, the butler, the under-butler, and 2 footmen, and that is a generous establishment already. So tonight, 3 of the visiting valets are in the dining room in white gloves, having been asked, in the way one asks a man who cannot refuse, and each of them stands where the butler put him at 6:30 when he walked them through it once. The odd man is in the serving room and will not cross the threshold, because he has not the height or the coat for it, and everyone, including the odd man, understands that. The butler stands at the sideboard and never handles a plate. He pours wine, he watches the room, and he moves the whole thing with his eyebrows. There is one more room in this business, and it is the one with the strongest door in the house. The plate room opens off the butler's pantry, and it is a windowless closet with a lined door, and the drawers inside it are baize on the bottom and green baize dividers between, so that no piece touches another piece. In it lives the silver, the dinner service, the entree dishes, the candelabra, the apparatus, the 2 soup tureens, the sauce boats, the fish knives, the dessert service with the gilt edges, and about 140 pieces of flatware. It is counted out before dinner against a written list, and counted back in after, in the small hours, by the butler himself, who then locks the door and sleeps in the pantry next to it, in a bed that folds up against the wall in daylight and fools nobody. He does not do this because he suspects the housemaids. He does it because of what the drawers are worth. The silver in that closet stands at something over £2,000, which is more than the entire indoor wage bill of this house for a decade. It is not tableware. It is the family's savings, kept in a form that can be looked at over dinner, and a man who is responsible for it counts it twice a day for the rest of his working life. And there is the other reason, which nobody says at the table and everybody says below it. A servant in this house has no written contract, no pension, and nothing at all to carry into the next place, except a character reference from the family. If a fork cannot be accounted for, the question does not settle on the house, it settles on a person. So the list is read out, and the drawers are counted, and the door is locked, and the counting protects the ones doing the counting quite as much as it protects the plate. At 8 the doors open, and I am not in the room. The dining room is not my territory. It is the butler's, and the line between us is understood so well that we have never once needed to discuss it. Everything that arrives in that room came through my hands somewhere earlier in the day. The linen, the lamps, the flowers, the stores the sauces were made from, the girl who scoured the molds, the fires that warmed the room at 4 so it would be pleasant at 8. But at the moment of the dinner itself, I stand on my own side of the passage with the serving room door swinging beside me, and I listen. What comes through 2 closed doors is not words. It is a broad, rising, comfortable sound, laughter going up in a body and then breaking apart, and a chair, and the small, clean chime of a glass being set down on wood. Once, a woman's voice, quite clearly saying the word Tuesday, and then everybody laughing again, for a reason I will never know. And I can smell the kitchen, fish, and hot butter, and the sharp singed smell of the charcoal stove, and underneath it, the coal and the wet stone of the passage. That is the smell of my whole evening, and it does not exist in the room 10 yards away. They have wax and fern and grapes. The architecture took the smell off the food before it arrived, and I stand in the place where the smell was taken off. At 20 minutes to 9, the fish sauce breaks. It happens in the way these things happen, which is quietly and entirely without drama. The cook lifts the pan, looks into it, and says one short word. The sauce has separated, oil sitting away from the rest of it in beads, and it cannot go up. Behind her, the fish is out of the water and waiting, and upstairs, 18 people have just finished their soup. Nobody runs. The cook sets a fresh basin over water. The kitchen maid brings her yolks and a knob of butter without being asked, and she begins again with her back very straight. In the serving room, the butler, who has been given the news by the under-butler in 5 words at the door, sends the entrees round a second time, which is a thing the Russian fashion allows, and which reads upstairs as generosity. 4 minutes. The fish goes up at 4 minutes past 9, instead of at 9, under its cover, hot. And that is all of it. No one at the table learns that anything happened. No one at the table could have learned it, because the whole design of this house, the passage, the closet, the covers, the doors, the 200 yards, exists precisely so that a failure of 4 minutes in a hot kitchen arrives upstairs as a pleasant offer of more quail. The ripple went out and hit the baize door and stopped there, which is what the baize door is for. By 9:15, the dining room has stopped needing anything from you. The ladies rise and go through to the drawing room. The gentlemen stay behind with the decanters and the walnuts, and for the first time since 4 o'clock, the bellboard hangs still long enough for the maids in the passage to hear the clock in the kitchen court. Downstairs, that stillness is the signal to eat. The order of it is fixed, and it is not fixed by kindness. The servants' hall has already had its dinner at midday, the real meal of the day, hot meat and vegetables, and a boiled pudding at a long scrubbed table. What comes now is supper, which is cold, and which happens in shifts, because the people who serve the family cannot eat while the family is still being served. So the housemaids and the still-room maid and the laundry women, whose work above stairs finished at 8, sit down first to cold beef and bread and cheese and pickles and their beer. The footmen come down later in 1s and 2s as the dining room releases them, still in livery, and eat standing at the sideboard as often as sitting, because the drawing room will want coffee, and then the smoking room will want soda water, and one of them must always be within hearing of the board. The scullery maid eats last of anyone, because her sinks do not empty themselves. She is 14. There is a plate kept back for her under a cover on the range shelf, and it is one of the very few small mercies in this house that is arranged without anybody being told to arrange it. You do not eat in the hall, neither does the butler, nor the cook, nor the visiting ladies' maids and valets who have spent the day discovering how our back stairs are laid out. The upper servants take their supper in your sitting room, and the whole thing is conducted with an exactness that would look absurd if you had not lived inside it for 12 years. The butler sits at one end, you sit at the other. Cheese, a cold bird if there is one, biscuits, a glass of sherry from a bottle that is entered in your book as such. The visiting maids are placed according to the standing of the woman each of them dresses, and everyone at the table knows the order before anyone sits down, and nobody says a word about it, and it is understood that a valet to an earl's son will be handed the biscuits before a lady's maid to a woman with no title at all. Then, at about 20 minutes to 10, the pudding comes down. It arrives on a footman's tray with the top of it gone. The dish is a charlotte, and the guests took 2/3 of it, and the remaining third is set on the table in your sitting room, with a spoon put beside it, as though it were a perfectly ordinary thing to eat someone else's leavings by candlelight at the end of a working day. Everybody eats it. It is very good. The cook made it at 4:30, and she eats her portion of it with an expression that gives away nothing at all, and the ice that chilled it was cut out of the lake in January by men who will never taste a charlotte in their lives. Nothing about this strikes anyone at the table as remarkable. Food traveling downward is simply how a house of this kind moves. The best of it goes up, what survives comes back, and the further down the table you sit, the later and the colder your share of the day arrives. Supper is cleared by 10, and now begins the part of the evening that the family, quite honestly, believes does not exist. Because when the guests say afterwards that it was a quiet evening, they will be describing what happened in 3 rooms. In the rest of the house, between 10 o'clock and midnight, the bellboard is busier than it was at any hour except the arrivals. The tea tray goes up to the drawing room. The whiskey and the soda and the fresh candles go to the smoking room, where the gentlemen will sit until well past 1. At 10:20, a bell rings from the blue bedroom, and a housemaid climbs 2 flights of back stairs to make up a fire that was laid at 6 in the morning and is now down to a red core, because the lady who is going up early is cold. At 10:30, the library bell rings, and a footman crosses the whole ground floor to be told that there was a book on the table by the window this afternoon, a green one, and it is not there now, and it is wanted. He finds it in the morning room where somebody carried it, and takes it up, and is thanked pleasantly. 11 o'clock brings hot water, all of it again, every can filled in the back kitchen, every flannel cover, every back stair, every landing, all the arithmetic of the morning run backwards in the dark by girls who were on their feet before 6. 2 of the visiting ladies' maids come down for cans of their own, because they will not put their mistresses to bed without hot water, and they are entitled to ask, and asking makes work for somebody else, and everybody in the passage understands the transaction perfectly. At 11:20, a bell rings that you cannot immediately place, and you go yourself, because a bell you cannot place is worth walking. It is a guest who has decided she would like a biscuit and a little brandy and water, and would it be a very great trouble? You say, it is no trouble whatsoever. This is true in the sense that the biscuit exists and the brandy exists. It is untrue in every other sense, because it means the still-room maid, who was about to be allowed to go up, stays down another 20 minutes, and the footman, who brings the tray up, will be the last person in this house to go to bed, except you and the butler. Stand in the passage and count the movement. Between 10 and midnight, the maids of this household climb something in the region of 120 flights of back stairs. Nobody upstairs is aware of a single one of them. The bells make no sound in the rooms they are rung from. Only here, in a servant's passage behind a green door, where a row of small brass tongues shivers on wires, and a girl looks up to see which room has spoken. Here is the number the whole week comes down to, and it is worth setting out plainly, because it is the part of the machinery that never appears in any account of country house life, written by anyone who slept upstairs. 30 and more people work indoors and out to make this house run. The butler has perhaps £70 a year. You have 60, with your board and your fire and your candles. A cook of real reputation might have 50 or 60 in a house like this. A valet takes perhaps 50, a first footman around 30, a second footman 24, a lady's maid to the daughters something near 30. The housemaids have between 14 and 18 pounds a year, the laundry maids something similar, the still room maid 16, and the scullery maid, who is 14 years old and whose hands are permanently red to the wrist, has £9 a year, and her keep. Add the outdoor people, the coachman and the grooms and the gardeners, under a head gardener who has his own cottage and his 40-odd pounds and his fruit to answer for, and the whole wage bill of this establishment comes to something in the region of £800 a year, not 800 each, 800 for all of them, together, for 12 months. Now set beside it this 1 week, 18 at dinner every night for 7 nights, the game, the fish brought up from the coast on ice, the extra butcher's meat, the butter and cream, the coffee and the tea, and the loaf sugar going out of your storeroom at 3 times the ordinary rate. The wine, which is the largest single line, and which you do not control, because the cellar is the butler's. The additional coal, tons of it, for the guest bedroom fires, and the extra hot water, and the glass houses that produced the strawberries, the candles, and the paraffin, the board of a dozen visiting servants who arrived with the trunks. Reckon it honestly, and this week costs somewhere near £150. £150 for 7 days of pleasant conversation. The scullery maid, at £9 a year, would need to work 16 years to earn what this house will spend before Sunday, on being agreeable. That is not a figure anybody in the drawing room could tell you, and it is not a figure they are hiding. It is simply not a figure that exists for them, in the way that the temperature of the servants' passage does not exist for them. The luxury upstairs is not expensive, because the objects in it are expensive. It is expensive because it takes £800 of human beings a year to keep it looking effortless, and because the fastest way to make anything look effortless is to pay somebody very little to do the effort out of sight. At midnight you go into your own sitting room and shut the door. The fire is low, but it is yours. The candle on the table is yours, in the sense that the office allows you candles and does not count them the way it counts hers. The daybook is open at today's page, and there are 9 lines still to enter, so you sit down, uncap the ink, and enter them. Tea, sugar, soap, candles, the sherry, the extra flour, the ice broken and used, the linen given out, the linen returned. Your handwriting at midnight is exactly the same as your handwriting at 7 in the morning, which is a small vanity, and you allow yourself it. Then the kettle on the hob, and the pot, and your own tea from your own caddy, with your own key, and 2 lumps of sugar, which are not weighed out for you by anybody. This is the whole of your evening. It lasts perhaps 20 minutes, and you would not trade it. 12 years in this house, and sitting here with the pen still warm in your fingers, it is worth saying plainly what those 12 years have made you, because nobody upstairs will ever say it, and there is no document in this building that records it. You can hold 600 and some articles of linen in your head, by mark and by condition, and tell without opening a cupboard which sheets have 3 more washes in them. You can look at a laid fire and know who laid it. You can carry 200 prices, keep 4 accounts, judge in half a second how a girl of 15 is going to take a correction, and know on a Tuesday which of your maids will be in tears by Friday, and why, and quietly move her work so that she is not. You have never once, in 12 years, sent a guest into a room that was not ready. You are extremely good at this. Nobody in the house has told you so in 11 of those 12 years, and you know it anyway, which is a different thing from being told, and in some ways a sturdier one. The tea goes cold at the bottom of the pot before you have quite finished it, which happens most nights, and you drink the last of it anyway. Then the cup goes on the tray, and the tray goes on the side table for the morning, and you stand and shake out your skirts and reach for the candlestick. It is a flat brass one, with a guard, kept on the shelf by the door for exactly this purpose. You light it from the fire with a paper spill rather than waste a match, and the flame takes and steadies, and the room shrinks around it to the size of your own 2 hands. Then the keys, lifted off the hook and settled at your waist where they have hung since 20 minutes before 6 this morning. They are cold. They have been off you for less than half an hour, and they have gone cold in that time, which tells you something about the temperature of a stone-floored passage in Wiltshire in March. The last round of the house takes you between 20 minutes and half an hour, depending on what you find, and you have never once skipped it. Out of your own door first, and the still room across the way, where the fire is out and the damper closed and the shutter fast. You put your hand flat on the range plate to be certain, and it is barely warm, and the preserve jars stand in their rows with their paper caps tied down. The smell in here at night is different from the smell in the morning. In the morning it is sugar and hot copper. Now it is only orange flower water and cold stone and something faintly of lemons. The kitchen next, which is not your ground, but which you walk anyway. The great range has been banked down for the night, the ashes raked forward, the flue shut to a crack, so there is fire enough left at 5 to bring the kettles round quickly. The copper is up on its hooks, every pan of it, the whole graduated run from the stock-pot to the little saucepans no bigger than a teacup, and the light of one candle finds all of them at once and turns the far wall into something like the inside of a bell. The scullery beyond is wet and dark and orderly. You try the yard door, bolted top and bottom. You try the door to the covered way, and that is bolted too, and the key in it turned. The storeroom then, which is entirely yours. You unlock it, though there is no reason to, and hold the candle up, and look at the tea chest, and the sugar loaves in their blue paper, and the ranked candle boxes, and the soap stacked to season, and you look at it for perhaps 4 seconds, and then you lock it again, and try the handle twice. You could not tell anybody why you do this. It is not that you suspect a person, it is that the last thing between the house and disorder is a locked door with your key in it, and you like to hear the bolt go home. Past the butler's pantry, there is a line of light under the door, thin and yellow, and the sound of the plate basket being set down. He is counting the silver in for the night, as he counted it out before dinner, and will count it out again at 9 tomorrow. And when he has finished, he will lock the strong closet and go to bed in the little room built against its wall, which is where the butler in a house like this sleeps, because £150 worth of plate is not left in a building overnight without a man breathing next to it. You do not knock, you go by. Up the back stairs, which are bare wood, and which you can climb with your eyes closed, and frequently do. The women's passage under the roof is warm at one end and cold at the other, and the doors are shut, and behind them are 11 people asleep. You hear one of them turn over, you hear the whistle of someone's breathing with a March cold in it, and you make a note to send her a jug of blackcurrant in the morning and to keep her off the laundry. Outside the second door, a pair of boots. You move them so that nobody puts a foot in them coming out in the dark. Outside the fourth door, a candle end left burning in a saucer, which is the only thing on this round that ever makes your heart go quickly. You pinch it out between your finger and thumb without hesitating. Tomorrow you will find out whose it was, and you will say something short and unpleasant about attics and thatch, and how quickly old timber goes up, and it will be the sharpest thing you say all week, and the girl will remember it for years, and that is precisely what you want. Then down the little stair, and through the baize door, and everything changes under your feet. Carpet first. The runner in the guest corridor is thick enough that your own footsteps disappear, and the transition is so abrupt that after 12 years it still registers as a kind of pressure change, like coming in out of wind. The air is warmer here by several degrees. It smells of hyacinths from the jars on the landing table and of the beeswax the housemaid rubbed into the banister rail this afternoon, and very faintly of the cigars from the smoking room, which will need the windows opened at 7. One door has light behind it. Somebody is reading in bed and will ring in a while for something, and there is a housemaid sitting up in the passage chair at the end for exactly that reason. You nod to her. She half rises, and you shake your head, and she sits. A brass hot water can stands outside another door where somebody set it down and did not carry it in, and it is stone cold now, and there will be a ring on the floorboard under it. You pick it up yourself and carry it, because there is nobody else on this floor who ought to be carrying anything at this hour, and because you have carried a great many cans in your life, and one more is nothing. On the hall chair at the head of the stairs, there is a book left face down, with its spine cracking. You close it, mark the place with the ribbon that is already in it, and set it on the table where its owner will find it, and think, without thinking, that it must have been there all along. Down the front stairs, which you use only at night. The shutters in the hall are barred, and the front door is bolted and chained, and the mat is straight. The drawing-room fire is a grey heap with no red left in it, and the 40 candles are out and cold, and their sockets have been cleared already, and somebody has plumped the cushions on the sofa so that the whole room sits there in the dark, looking as though nobody has been in it since it was built. The dining room is dark and shut. Tomorrow at 8:30 it will be a different room entirely, and no one will be able to say what changed. The bellboard in the service passage is quiet. You stand under it for a second and look at the row of little painted labels, all still, all silent, and you know the shape of the day just past from having watched them all evening, the way another person might read weather from a glass. You go back through the baize door and let it swing shut on its spring behind you, and it closes with the soft sound it always makes, and the carpet stops and the stone begins. So, Here is the thing that is true, and it is worth saying at the end of a day like this one, plainly, because nobody in the building is going to say it in the morning. What you did today was skilled work, not merely hard, not merely long, but genuinely skilled, the way a foreman's work is skilled, or a purser's. You held an inventory of some hundreds of items in your head. You ran 4 sets of accounts to the shilling. You directed the labor of about 30 people through a day that had roughly 200 separate operations in it, in the correct order, in a building deliberately designed to make communication slow. You judged a dozen small human situations correctly. You produced, out of coal and cold water and paraffin and unheated stone, a house in which 14 people spent an evening in perfect comfort and never once thought about how any of it arrived, and they were delighted. Their pleasure was real. The strawberries in March were real. The warm rooms were real. The ease was real. And you made it. And here is the other thing that is true, and it sits alongside the first without cancelling it. None of it is written down under your name. There is no ledger in this house where the word for what you do appears next to the value of it. Your wages are £60 a year, and your board, which is good money for a woman and a small fraction of what the week's entertainment cost. There is no pension attached to the post. There is no certificate, no register of your trade, nothing you could carry to another county and show to a stranger. What you have instead is a character reference, written in the hand of the woman upstairs, and if the family should go abroad, or sell up, or take a dislike to you, or simply die, that single sheet of paper is the whole of your professional existence. Without it, you are a woman of 42, with no husband, no children, no capital, and no documented history whatsoever. The most competent person in the building is also the one whose competence leaves no trace. This is not a complaint about the people asleep in the beds upstairs. They did not invent this, and most of them have never once thought about it, and the ones who have not much power over it either. It is an observation about a system, and the observation is simply this: the house was built so that the work would not be seen, and it succeeded so completely that the workers were not seen either, and that was not an accident of the architecture, it was the point of the architecture. The keys go back on their hook beside your door, all of them, and the ring settles against the wood with a small clash, and then is quiet. You bank your own fire. You put the guard across it. You look once at the account book, closed, squared with the edge of the table. Then the candle, pinched out between finger and thumb, and the smell of it in the dark. Upstairs, the corridors hold their warmth. In the passage, the airing cupboard stands with its door shut on stacks of linen still faintly warm, warm as bread, waiting for tomorrow. And the house lets its timbers down one board at a time and settles, and holds 14 sleeping guests and 30 sleeping servants, and not one sound between them, and goes on being, all through the night, in the dark, exactly what it was built to look like.